I'm not sure about others if everybody was able to get connected or not. It was very slow at my end, so we'll just give it a few moments just to see if everybody is on. I see the Chief Executive has been able to get on. John, have you heard from any other members, John, about any other difficulties?
Not so far, Chair. No.
Okay, no, that's fine. Maybe it was just at my end. It was connecting for some time, but has eventually let me through. Okay, it's 4 o'clock, so if there does seem to be quite a few members online, John, so if you want to proceed and take the roll call, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members, to all members of Governance and Strategic Planning Committee. You're hereby summoned to attend the monthly meeting of the committee, which will be held virtually today in whatever location you're at on Tuesday, the 30th of November 2021 at 4 o'clock. And Chair, starting with the roll call, Alderman Breslin.
Here, John.
Alderman Devaney.
Here, John.
Alderman McClintock.
Here, John.
Alderman McCready.
Here.
Councillor John Boyle.
Here.
Councillor Donnelly.
Anshaw.
Councillor Doyle.
Here, John.
Councillor Duffy.
Sure.
Councillor Farrell.
Here.
Councillor Fleming. Councillor Fleming. Councillor Heaney.
Sure, John.
Councillor McHugh.
Sure, John.
Councillor Mooney.
John.
And Councillor Riley.
Here, John.
Thank you,
Okay,
Chair.
thanks, John, for that. Moving to item 3, which is the broadcasting statement. So I'll just read the broadcasting statement for everyone. I would like to remind everyone who is in remote attendance that this meeting will be broadcast live via the Council's YouTube channel and will be available for viewing by the public and the media. The broadcast will also be available for repeated viewing at a later date. The broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with Council protocol. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. By participating in this meeting, you are consenting to be filmed and to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting and training purposes and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. A copy of the Council privacy notice may be found on the Council's website. So moving on to the next item, which is item 4, any declarations of members' interest for today's business. If you want to put them into the chat box, and then I can I'll verbalize them as well, because members of the public can't see the chat box, so I need to read them out. So we have one in the chat box from Alderman Devaney, declaration of interest as an airport board member. Similar declaration from Councillor John Boyle. And members, if a declaration of interest arises during the meeting, just pop it into the chat box, and then we can record it in the usual way. Members, on the agenda there's no items for chairperson's business on the agenda, but I'm going to take them now because that's probably an oversight. We usually take chair's business, so there's been a number of people who contacted me about chairperson's business, so I'll bring in them in due course. And before I do that, I see a number of others. John Kelpie has indicated he's a member of the board of CODA, himself and Alfie Dallas. Thanks for that, Chief Executive. And thanks, Councillor Paul Fleming. Your attendance is noted, and also a declaration as a member of the airport board. Members, in relation to chairperson's business, although we're still in November, can I just wish you all a very happy Christmas. The next meeting of this committee is not until January, so in my formal role as chair, just to extend that warm welcome and season greetings to you all, councillors and members of the public, and obviously also council staff. And on the subject of council staff, while we are all joining this meeting virtually today as per the Northern Ireland executive regulations for encouraging people to work from home, I'm also conscious that the Guildhall and the Tower Museum are closed to the public at the moment because of the facilities need to undergo a deep clean because members of staff have contracted COVID. So good wishes to all of those council staff affected that they'll make a full recovery from the virus. In relation to the another item that has been brought to my attention, obviously it's a piece of congratulations and well done message to both Mary Lindsay, the former principal of St Mary's College, and Michael Allen, the current principal of Lisneal College, on their achievements of winning either the Lifetime Award for Mary Lindsay and the Head Teacher of the Year in a secondary school for Michael Allen. It's such a great achievement for our city to have the recipients of 2 of those awards. And I know that the Mayor already has put in place arrangements to have a civic reception for both individuals so that they and their family can be rightly recognised for the contribution that they've provided to education in our city and district, including recognised, I have to say, by former President Bill Clinton. And I think it was fitting that on this day, 26 years ago, on the 30th of November, President Clinton made his first visit to Northern Ireland and came to our city and addressed people from Guildhall Square. So it was fitting that he joined in with the words of congratulations to those individuals. So we look forward to the Mayor marking that occasion in due course. The final item of Chairperson's business that I have is from an issue that was asked to be raised with me by Councillor Sean Harkin. So Councillor Harkin, if you're online, I'll bring you in now.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come in on this issue, especially since I'm not a member of the committee. So thank you for that. I think we've all seen in the local press that workers are on strike at Foyle Port, and a number of councillors have joined them on the picket line on Friday and Monday. I was there myself, and I think that you know, this is a very, very hard job. If people know about dock work, it's a challenging job, and there's a long history of dock work in Derry, the equivalent in some ways of our shirt factory workers in terms of dock workers being very much the backbone of the city over many decades. And it's very unfortunate that the dock workers have been forced out on strike. I think that we as a council, given our relationship to the port and given the port's significance to the district, and also the port's plans for expansion and the different discussions that we are involved in with the port about expansion, that this is not an issue that we can ignore. And I think we cannot ignore an issue of workers' rights in our district as well. And if people don't know what's going on, I think that the demands that the workers are making for a pay increase are exceptionally modest. There are workers demanding 10% increases right now, which they have every right to do. The dock workers that work for Foyle Port are asking for a 2.1 pay increase, and they've been offered a 0.4% increase. That was the original offer from the Foyle Port. And the dock workers who are members of Unite had a pay freeze last year, which they accepted because of the pandemic and because of the impact on the port. And this year they're asking for 2.1%. In the context of inflation, that is not even half of what the inflation rate is right now, and that's why it's a very, very modest demand. Now, there's two things I think that are unacceptable. One is that the Foyle Port bosses have went to the press and more or less said that the workers there are being greedy because they're already well paid. And for a CEO, in my opinion, probably on 100 grand a year, who drives up to the picket line in a car worth almost £100,000 itself, it's a disgraceful attempt to demonise striking dock workers. The second point is that on Friday, the workers were on the picket line for less than half an hour, and the PSNI turned up threatening prosecution. And they again turned up on Monday, again threatening prosecution to striking workers. And that only happened because they were called out by employers in the port. And this is an act of intimidation, I believe, and an act of harassment. And I think we cannot tolerate this as a council that stands for workers' rights. So I think we have to send a very strong message, both to the port employers that their treatment of workers is completely unacceptable, and to the workers that we are on their side in this dispute. And I think we should be on their side. And I think we have to make sure that we're discussing this issue, because we cannot act like this is happening and that it is of no consequence or connection to the council. So I would urge this committee today to, one, agree to send a message of support to the striking dockers, and number two, ask for an immediate meeting with the Foyle Port employers so that we can convey our concerns as a council, and urge them to reach an immediate settlement with the trade union, with the workers, and to meet their very modest demands. Now, I can't make a proposal today, but I will put into the chat box, what I think we should be proposing, and if anybody else wants to move that forward, I will paste it in there and they can take it forward. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Harkin, for the contribution. And I see you just putting in some text into the chat box, which will give members a chance to see and read through. I see in the chat box that Alderman Ryan McCready declared an interest as a commissioner on the Foyle Port, and Councillor Doyle has indicated that he's happy to make that a proposal, and also making a declaration of interest as a member of Unison. Councillor Donnelly is also happy to support Councillor Harkin's proposal. So the proposal is in the chat box. I think Nuala is online as the minute taker. Nuala, do you want to try and grab that text and put it up on the screen so that everybody can see it, if that's possible, please? And then I can take indicated speakers. I appreciate Councillor Doyle and Councillor Donnelly are indicating they are supportive of the text. Do either of the two of you wish to speak to it, or are you happy enough just to have your comments in the chat box attributed to it? Okay.
Sorry, and just in terms of what Sean said, I just want to be associated with the remarks. I got a phone call from a member of staff when the police were called to the premises, and to be honest, I genuinely couldn't believe that someone in the port would be so foolish as to call the police to a strike, and two, that the police would be so silly as to attend. And in terms of, I'm not on any committees or outside bodies in relation related to the port, but I would like to know if someone in the officer team might be able to tell me what is our management relationship with the port, because obviously there are implications. I know, as I saw in the chat box there, that Alderman McCready's a commissioner. I think we've got a few others as well. In terms of our responsibility with regards to oversight with the port, can somebody outline what those are? And if at any point it was appropriate for us to be informed as a corporate body as to the decisions made, for example, to phone the police. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Doyle, there's a number of questions in that we might pick up in due course, but next indicated speaker was Alderman McCready. Ryan, go ahead. Alderman McCready, yep, I can hear you now. Go ahead.
Good. So, yeah, I declare my interest as a commissioner on the port, and I'm going to be, well, first I just kind of have a wee bit of advice before I do comment, because I don't want to inadvertently influence or detract away from the existing processes that are there for workers and workers' rights, which I do fully support. So can you just clarify with the aspects of the motion and with my declaration? I speak here as a councillor, but what I can say on here can be used in my role as a commissioner, either for or against different aspects of this. So I don't want to be taken advantage of, but equally I do have a voice and I want to use it. So can I just ask the city solicitor for just a bit of an opinion on whether I stay in this to talk, discuss, or indeed do I have a vote in this, or do I have to withdraw? Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks for that. Alderman McCready, I'm just checking to see if the city solicitor's on the line, if you can provide some advice to that.
Chair, yes, as a director of Foyle Port, obviously declarations of interest are a matter for the individual member, but I would not have thought it would be appropriate for the councillor to be involved in this discussion, Chair. Chair, also just to remind members that if a motion is to be considered under chairperson's business, that does require the consent of those members that are present to consider the motion under standing orders.
Yep, thanks for that, Philip. Members, I'm also conscious that the Mayor already has indicated that he doesn't intend or is encouraging us not to table motions later on this month. He made that known at full council. So in the normal way, I would suggest that Councillor Harkin takes this through to full council as a notice for motion, but given the fact that the strike is ongoing at the moment and the fact that in December there may not be the opportunity in the usual way to table notices of motion, I'm happy for the motion to be on the floor for debate. In terms of that, Philip, I'm not sure, do you need the consent of the committee to have that as a notice of motion, or do I have the prerogative as chair to accept it? Could you give some clarification on that?
I haven't seen any member expressing a lack of consent to deal with it, so
Yeah.
it was just to formally record the matter for the purposes of the minutes that it was being progressed with the consent of the meeting.
Yep, no, that's fine, Philip. Thank you. Thanks, Nuala, for putting it onto the screen. Members, I'm checking the chat box. I know Councillor Donnelly has indicated he's happy enough in terms of not wanting to speak to it right now. I don't see anyone else indicating that they wish to speak. And as has been outlined, nobody has spoken against this. So I'm going to take this.
Chair, Martin.
Yes.
Did I put it in the chat box?
Oh, sorry, Councillor Fleming. I didn't see that. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Fleming.
No, just very briefly, Chair, and thank you, and thank the Councillor Harkin. On behalf of Sinn Féin, I was down at the picket yesterday, solidarity with the workers, and very peaceful and dignified picket it was for the time that I was there, and I don't see it being any different than the time. It's very unfortunate that the workers have been put in this position. And certainly from our point of view, we would be supportive of the motion that is brought forward, and in terms of the workers getting a justified, a realistic pay raise, given the circumstances that a lot of people find themselves in at this particular time. Obviously, not wanting to don't want to be on a picket line at any time, but certainly not of Christmas. So certainly from our point of view, we want to see this resolved as quickly as possible, and that the workers get what they deserve. Sure.
Thank you for that, Councillor Fleming. Alderman McCready, to speak on the motion, is that text you just put in there now? Do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, please, Chair.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. And I've got no issues as a councillor supporting this motion. I don't think it interferes in any way, albeit it's at the very edge because of my connection as a commissioner. But I'm not going to deflect or use that as an excuse. Firstly, Chair, irrespective of whether I'm connected to the port or not, the existing framework for industrial action for workers' rights and the communication to the organisation, I fully support. And I look forward to this going through for the council to have a meeting with the Foyle Port executive team. And secondly, and probably finally, Chair, is from what I have seen and heard, both in this committee by the member Harkin, and I do put on record his deep connections with Unite. From my perspective here, that he is conflating a large number of issues and not telling all the facts. I won't go that far of saying mistruths, but I can say that not all the facts are being presented fairly to members within this committee. And indeed, some of those facts have been put on record on the media, thankfully. And so I'll just note a few facts, and I say it without prejudice and without anything else, because there is ongoing disputes and engagement to have some form of resolution. And I say this with the experience I have of being inside the boardroom as a commissioner, speaking up for workers' rights in all angles. They're at the forefront of my mind when I conduct port business. And the examples I see, and I queried over the last 10 to 14 years, that when all other organisations had pay freezes and didn't increase pay over many, many years, I checked with the Foyle Port and they consistently increased the pay rises in line with inflation or above in some cases. And even during the pandemic, where it would have been easier to have severance packages and let people go, Foyle Port didn't. They implemented an unprecedented support package to safeguard the workforce and to protect their incomes. Now, when I looked at the incomes and the average or the mean and the median throughout the city and district, those wages are substantial. They are well deserved and well earned, and it's 58% above the median annual earnings throughout the city and district. So when you put that into context, and I say this with my heart, I stand with them, but I don't think their union has done them any favours on this. When you look across the council area, and I speak with people every single day trying to pay for fuel and food, and they are paid nowhere near this. So that 58% should be noted, members and chair. And the staff at the ports, they are valuable. They are part of they are Foyle Port. There's no Foyle Port without the workers. I just don't think that they're being treated fairly by Unite or their union representatives. I think they've got this wrong in a lot of the cases. They've taken a strategy from across the UK and GB in terms of their asks, but they haven't looked at the micro level at the individual cases. And in the case of Foyle Port, they are very, very valued members of the workforce. And what has been said here by Member Harkin is not the full story. So I encourage all members, when you go forward to this meeting as a council, take the facts with you. Thanks, Chair.
Chair, can I briefly respond to that?
So,
thank you.
I'll bring you back in due course, Councillor Harkin. Yeah. I have a number of other indicated speakers. Councillor Boyle and then Alderman Devaney. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Chair. Like Councillor Fleming, actually, I will keep it brief. On behalf of the SDLP, we're entirely content to support the motion that's placed in front of us. It is certainly our view that the workers are seeking it is a modest request from the dock workers, bearing in mind that it is indeed significantly below the current inflation rate. And can I also just add a further amendment to that? I don't expect that anyone will oppose this idea, but can I also add, and that council engage with unions and workers' representatives in relation to the matter, and also to put on record our support for the education and welfare officers of the Education Authority, who are also currently in dispute, primarily because of the disparity between their pay levels and those of social workers, who are in effect doing performing a similar role. So just to say again briefly, fully supportive. It's a modest enough request, notwithstanding everything that Alderman McCready has said prior to me speaking. And of course, we will enter into all discussions with an open mind. But I think it's important for us as a council, with representatives who from this council who sit as commissioners, to understand all of the matters concerning and pertaining to this, and to well, in the first instance, always support workers and what I think, and I do agree, are modest requests.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Boyle. Could you pop in your amendment into the chat box? while I bring in the next speaker, which is Alderman Devaney. Go ahead, Morris.
Chair, for allowing me in, and look, we have no problem in supporting the proposal coming forward here. Our party, would be on record that we will always support fair increases and support workers' rights. And look, if this meeting of minds comes together, brings a resolution to the issue, it would be very, very welcome. And I think the discussion between, and we talk about facts and half truths or whatever. I think a meeting like this between the workers and led by council and management of the port will clear up any of those ambiguities that are out there, and we would be coming in with a very clear mind on it, Chair. But no problem in supporting the proposal. Thanks, Chair.
Yep, thank you for that, Alderman Devaney. Councillor Boyle is, oh yeah, he's just popped it in and it's been seconded by Councillor Mooney. So Nuala, can you place that amendment on the screen as well, please? And in the meantime, when you're doing that, I'll bring back in Councillor Harkin, who wished to respond. Go ahead, Councillor Harkin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And it's good to hear that the majority of committee members are in support of this motion, supporting the workers' demands and supporting their strike. And I suppose I need to respond to Alderman McCready's remarks. I believe that Alderman McCready is himself a commissioner, which I believe is a paid position. Maybe if he could clarify how much he's paid a year, if it's a stipend. But he said that he supports the workers, but then he went on to repeat the things that the Boyle Port employers have said about the workers, which is that they're paid more than workers in dairy. And the thing is, given wages are so low here, it's not difficult to be paid more than the average or median wage. And the point is, the workers believe that they should be paid what the going rates are in the sector. So I think that is an injustice on the workers, that basically it's doing them down because it's saying that they're being greedy, that they're asking for too much. A pay freeze last year and a 2.1% pay increase this year is not a big ask. I believe they should be asking for a lot more. And like other workers, and there's 3 strikes in dairy this week. There's the Ulster the Magee professors and staff are on strike. The education welfare officers are on strike, and we have dock workers on strike. And I am in support of all of them. And for me, there's not 2 sides here. There's one side to be on, and that's the side of the workers. We have council workers asking for a 10% increase. We've got education workers asking for a 10% increase. We have nurses and social care workers asking for a 15% increase. So workers are asking for more, and they've got every right. And so, I think that Alderman McCready needs to clarify that I think that that's a serious conflict of interest. If he's serving on the board, if he's getting paid, and if it's a paid position, and then he's repeating the statement that was put out that I believe demonizes the workers and the trade union, Unite, who I think are doing a fantastic job. Now, the last thing is he made no comment about the police being called in to intimidate workers, and he has to say which side he is on there, because it was clearly Boyle Port employers, in my opinion, that called him. And then the last thing he said, that I have deep connections with Unite. And I don't know what he's talking about. I support all trade unions. I'm proud to be a trade unionist myself. And I believe that every worker has the right to join a trade union. And many of them across this city have been denied that right. And now we're seeing a trade union getting demonized for not representing their members properly and for asking for too much. So I think if the member wants to come back, I'd be happy to hear his response, particularly about a conflict of interest.
Okay, I'm going to try and direct people to to direct their comments through me in the chair, as opposed to going back and forth to each other. I appreciate that in the chat box we've now had another number of indicated speakers, so I'm going to bring in Councillor Donnelly, and then Alderman McCready can speak again because he's now speaking on the amendment. So Councillor Donnelly first. Go ahead, Gary.
Sorry, my good chair, and having some IT problems here, so just in case I get cut off or what. Chair, look, no, I was out there yesterday and stood along with the strikers, and many of them that I knew have known a long time. I think that the council's connection to the foil port for me is a bit awkward at the minute, and I have to concur with Councillor Harkin. I find Alderman McCready's comments a case of trying to ride two horses, Chair. He does acknowledge that these workers deserve the money, but then he almost goes on then to say, but they should be appreciative of it because there's people not getting as much of them. That's what's wrong with society. With a lot of people in society, it's almost be thankful for what you've got and keep your head down, because look, there is this attitude among some employers, there's plenty of people would do your job, and that's unfortunately what's coming across here. There is a conflict of interest with Alderman McCready, as which was well pointed out by Councillor Harkin. So I think he needs to be very careful there. Some of the strikers that I have spoke to there was also a pay disparity where two men or two workers could be doing the same job and one could be getting paid less money for the same job. So just want to support the proposal as I put in that I would second it, and I support the amendment too, and just like to send solidarity to those workers who are on strike. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Donnelly. Councillor McCready on the amendment. Go ahead, Ryan.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for members' discussion on this. So I did declare an interest. So for this groundbreaking conflict of interest, it's not groundbreaking. I declare all interests. And in the matter of transparency, the Foyle Port commissioners go through a process of selection, which every member, including independents, are encouraged to go forward to be on that board. And there's 3 positions which council are allowed to put members on. But the decision is made by a minister, in this case, the Minister for Infrastructure. It's remunerated. The package is £8,967.60 per annum that you engage on the board. So that's the first aspect. The second one on PSNI, if there's a criminal act or someone's breaking the law or there's an issue of breach of the peace, I'm not saying that happened. I'm saying if there's any case where someone needs to ring the PSNI, I'm not going to tell them yes or no. If they feel they have to, then they have to. I don't know the exact reasons why or ins and outs of what happened on Friday or Monday. It's a matter for the executive team and the union team or the representatives that were there. So there's been no suppression in any way from board level, or I would stand over the executive team on that. So yes, at this point here, not necessarily to try and ride 2 horses, is I am a commissioner, and so when I make decisions on that board presented with the information I have, I make those decisions and I stand over it, and I still do to this day. In particular, with the engagement, the offers, the reconciliation, the labour relations support, and everything else. And I could say so much more on the actual details of what came back from the unions, on what they asked for. At one point, they were happy to accept it, and then whenever the port came back and they take it forward, they then changed the goalposts and other aspects. So there's aspects of this which you can look at and say they were looking for a moderate pay rise and this and that. There's other aspects of the financial package which was presented as well. There's an unconditional £500 per for this annum that went past because of the impacts of COVID and everything else. So you have to look at it holistically. And I'd be absolutely clear as an elected rep speaking in the governance strategic planning of, I have no problem in standing up with solidarity of dock workers strike action and the process and the integrity of that process for what they ask for. Now, that's a process I agree with. And only in this case, because I know the mediation and the details of which, but I have to make a decision as a commissioner on that board. So I'm speaking on something that I've already made a decision on. So it's not the executive. So I know the member singled out and made some derogatory comments about someone's car and their conduct. he takes his lead from the board. The board make the decisions on this. So if you've got an issue, take it to the board. If there's any other outstanding questions for transparency that you have, Chair, for my conduct as a committee member on here or a commissioner, I'm at your disposal. And if members have anything else they want to talk to me about this, hey, I've nothing to fear. So thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Alderman McCready. The only thing I would say, and it's not for me to shape who contributes to this debate or what they say, but I would make the point that you were invited in to speak to the amendment. So I'm just wondering if you have a view on the amendment in terms of whether to support the amendment or not.
Chair, on reflection, I will have to abstain on both because I don't want to oppose it nor go against it, because as a councillor, I'm indifferent to people accessing or whatever this motion is. But I think if I am for or against, it would be prejudicial to any outcome and ongoing talks within this particular dispute. So happy to discuss it, but I will not vote on it on that premise.
Okay,
Thanks.
A couple of other comments in the chat box now, which I need to bring in, and then we'll try and draw this to a conclusion. Councillor Donnelly, on a point of clarification. Go ahead, Gary.
Thanks for letting me in. The previous speaker there said that there was remarks made, derogatory remarks made. I didn't hear any derogatory remarks being made. Could he clarify that, and could we have an opinion from the relevant officer? Are they derogatory remarks? Thank you.
Okay, I'll allow Alderman McCready to consider what he said, and in the meantime bring in Councillor Mooney. Sean.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the point of timetable and on the amendment, I was wondering would it be possible if meetings are to be arranged, could council meet with the unions and dockers representatives first? Obviously, because that's the motion itself, and it'd be helpful to hear from what the unions and the workers themselves say before we meet with the Foyle Port representatives, if that's okay. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Sean, for that. I take it, Sean, that in terms of the amendment that's in red, what you're indicating is that the word first should be in there, is that right? And to first engage with unions and dockers, is that correct?
Yes, Chair, that would be my slight amendment to that.
Okay,
and that's acceptable to the rest of the members.
Chair, Councillor John Boyle here. I had intended to place that wording in red further up under the paragraph. So,
okay.
I suppose the inclusion of the word first saves us having to do that for the, just to save some time.
Okay, so the proposer and the seconder of the amendment are happy with what is in red on front of us now with the amendment. Yeah. Okay. I have no other indicated speakers on the amendment, so I'm going to try and put the amendment to bed first of all. Nobody's spoken against the amendment. I accept that Alderman McCready indicated that he wished to abstain on it, but as no one else has spoken against it, I'm going to take that amendment as unanimous, with the exception of Alderman McCready's abstention, unless anybody indicates in the chat box. Give it a couple of seconds. No, so that amendment has been carried. And then in relation to the substantive motion, then again, people have spoken about it. We've had a good debate on the issue, and we're now at a stage where I have no other indicated speakers. Nobody has spoken against this motion, with the exception of Alderman McCready, who wishes to abstain on it. So again, putting this, Alderman McCready wishes now to speak to the substantive motion. I'll bring you back in, Alderman McCready, but can you be brief, please? Thank you.
Sure, thanks, Chair, and appreciate your latitude. Now, the derogatory remarks is just about singling someone out and commenting on, their style of welfare or cars and stuff. I just thought that was a bit disingenuous, and they're not there to defend themselves, and that would apply equally to all. So if somebody said that against a worker that was standing there, then I would say the same thing. So by all means, happy to discuss all these things in great detail, but the personal stuff, singling people out and how they dress, what they drive, is a really poor example for our young people. And lastly, is just on the PSNI one. There's a public road which meets Foyle Port. Whatever happens in that public road is not the responsibility of Foyle Port. That's a PSNI and a DFI matter. And I think when we had the initial discussions, that's kind of where that was revolved around. I'm happy to abstain on this. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Members, we've, as I said earlier, we've had a good lengthy discussion on this item, so I'm going to draw to a close now. There's no other indicated speakers, with the exception of Alderman McCready, who is abstaining on it. No one else has spoken against it, so I'm going to take this substantive motion as unanimous unless anybody indicates they wish to vote against it in the chat box. We'll give it another few moments. Okay, no other indicated speakers, so that passes unanimously with the exception of Alderman McCready's abstention. So thank you, members, for that. That concludes Chair's business. So I'm going to move on to the items on the agenda that are open for decision. And just before I do, just a little bit of housekeeping. We are now back in a virtual world where we see each other in rectangles, boxes, as opposed to face to face. So I will be applying the same procedures as we did back when we were meeting virtually in the past. We'll go a couple of hours and then take a comfort break at 6 p.m. and then we'll do another comfort break at 8 p.m. and another one at 10 o'clock and another one at 12 o'clock. I certainly don't envisage us being here to that length of time, but if we work in blocks of 2 hours, that allows members to plan ahead and arrange dinner and toilet breaks, comfort breaks, etc. So we'll go to 6 o'clock and then we'll take a 10-minute recess. So we're going to move on to item 5, which is the matters arising from the open minutes of the Governance and Strategic Planning Committee held on Tuesday the 2nd of November, pages 1 to 18. So we're going to take those for accuracy. First of all, if I could have a proposer for accuracy.
So proposed, Alderman Devaney.
Thanks, Morris. A seconder, please.
Seconded, Councillor Farrell.
Thanks, Rory. And then on to matters arising, and the first indicated speaker is Councillor Heaney Connor on GSP 189/21. Go ahead, Councillor Heaney.
Thanks, Chair. Just under this item, I just wanted to ask for an update from officers on the lighting of the Bay Park, Bay Road Park area, which came through this committee a while back. But there has been very little progress since then. So I don't know if there's anybody on the call who could give me a verbal update or could come back to me with something in the aftermath of this meeting. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Connor. Anybody on the call from an officer perspective that wants to give an update?
Chair, through you, members, I can find out the update in relation to that and come back to Councillor Heaney on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Karen. No other indicated speakers for matters arising. So I'm going to move on to item 6, which is the medium term capital financing and funding strategy. So hand over to officers for this item. I'm not sure who's taking this item from the officer team.
Should be Alfie if he's with us there.
Yes, Chair, apologies. I'm here.
Okay.
I was just having a bit of IT difficulty here. Members, so the purpose of the report is for you to endorse the ongoing work to further scope and develop our finance and funding strategy, and that's to ensure continued delivery of our strategic and community capital projects alongside the transformative City Deal and Inclusive Future Fund investment. So members, it's obviously a fairly detailed and complex report today, so I'll focus on the key issues. You'll be aware that our capital investment programme is a very significant portion of our overall expenditure, with 15.34% of our rates targeted towards that. And that's been facilitated through both rates investment as well as reallocation of savings realised through our efficiency plan. Very significant progress has been made, members, but obviously much remains to be delivered. And you'll be aware in particular of previous reports in November 2020, which approved an emerging funding strategy for our strategic leisure projects. Since that point, members, there's been obviously significant further demand for new projects and via a range of motions and other channels, as well as a significant resourcing gap that's been identified to achieve that continually growing scale of ambition. We're obviously now in the process of our rate striking for the 22-23 financial year, and our capital financing strategy will be a very critical component of that. The report does mention some of the new obligations that will be in front of us this year with the new Prudential Code and requirements to ensure that our capital investments are affordable and sustainable, and the importance of having regard to the long run financing implications of projects. And we probably start there, members, on a strong starting point, in that we do a lot of that anyway, the way we approve our capital programme. So members, the final point of context, the funding strategy obviously has to be considered in the context of the financial environment we're currently working on as we enter the rates process. We have the normal challenges of pay awards and national insurance increases and fuel and electricity costs, as well as obvious demand for new growth investment. And the pandemic still continues to impact on our income in particular. And we also face a significant risk as a result of the 25% cut, which has currently been implemented in relation to rate support grant, which, if not reversed, will have a direct 1.17% rates impact. And you'll be aware of the discussions ongoing in that regard to resolve that. So members, within that context, where do we currently sit in terms of progress? And that's set out in table section 3.1 of the report. We've delivered 72 million of capital investment projects over the past few years since the new council came into being. On top of that, there's a further 326 million of capital investment, which is currently fully funded and which will be progressing over the next few years. That includes 246 million in relation to our City Deal Inclusive Future Fund investment, as well as a further 74 million of community investment, and that's spread right across the district, as you'll see in table in section 3.1. Beyond that, members, we have currently scoped a further list of projects totaling almost 300 million. It clearly won't be possible to deliver all that, members, but the funding strategy that we're working on aims to deliver about 120 million of that sum, that representing 20 million of further community investment, as well as 100 million in our strategic projects, those being the strategic leisure projects and being in both Templemore and Strabane, as well as the civic commercial office development proposal as an integral element of the City Deal Riverfront proposals. So to put that in context, members, having delivered 72 million over the past 5 to 6 years, which in itself is a very significant figure, we're aiming to deliver a further 446 million in the next corresponding period. To finance that, members, requires 4 elements to be considered. Number 1, the capital financing costs, i.e. the loan repayments of the projects. Number 2, the ongoing revenue costs, such as maintenance, cleansing and staffing costs, which will not be covered by additional income. Number 3, the staff resources to deliver that scale of ambition. And you'll be aware that we've recently embarked on a recruitment process to secure that additional resourcing which has been identified. And we can fund that in the short term, members, through funding we set aside in reserves. But we do require recurrent investment to ensure those staff can continue to be funded beyond the next 3 years. So finally, members, we do have other growth initiatives that we do fund from short-term capital savings that will need to be addressed in any funding plan. So members, a detailed modelling and assessment of those 4 components has been carried out in relation to the 446 million programme of investment. The annual revenue requirement required to address that is circa 8 to 9.5 million, depending on interest rate movements. And in terms of the financial implications and strategy that we're working on to achieve that, as a starting point, 2.2 million has already been identified and ring-fenced as funded through efficiencies and savings, which leaves us a sum of 5.8 to 7.3 million that we need to find. The evolving strategy to achieve that includes 3 critical elements. Number 1, you'll be aware that we're aiming to realise 2 million through successful conclusion of business case discussions with government in relation to City of Derry Airport, and there's a separate report on that in today's committee. Number 2, we need to ensure that rate support grant cuts are urgently reversed and the grant is restored to its original and required levels. And number 3, members, investment of this magnitude can only be achieved with significant rates investment, and this sum has been quantified at circa 1.5% annual rates investment over a 6-year period. So whilst we will continue, members, to drive savings and efficiencies, at this point it must be noted that 3.9 million of efficiencies have already been driven out since the new council came into being, and a lot of those have been redirected towards that investment that we already have available for our capital plan. So members, a number of very critical considerations which will form an important element of our upcoming rates process. The recommendation in the report is that you endorse the ongoing work to further scope and develop our strategy to ensure continued delivery of our strategic and City Deal inclusive future fund investment, and also note the critical elements of the emerging funding strategy, i.e. the rate support grant restoration, the City of Derry Airport business case conclusion, and the required rates investment. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Alfie, for a very detailed and comprehensive paper as usual. I know the Chief Executive also wants to add some commentary, so I'll bring you in now. John, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. No, it's just briefly to add for members' information that obviously the papers today, many of them were subject to the discussion in the joint City Deal Capital Working Group meeting a number of weeks ago. They are papers that are all interdependent upon one another. We have brought to you today a series of very strategic papers in relation to the totality of Council's capital ambitions. Obviously, as Alfie has highlighted today, this is a developing funding strategy. This is not one which we are providing to you today as a sort of fait accompli, but as one that has a number of key elements that are being advanced in parallel. The scale of our ambition, members, as you know, both in terms of the raft of community projects that we're trying to deliver across the council area, but also the big transformational strategic projects, really is second to none. It is one of the most highly ambitious suite or program of projects that any council has ever taken forward, and does require a very significant commitment to a funding strategy to advance it. So the rest of the papers today with regard to City Deal, with regard to our strategic leisure projects, with regard to nearly all of our major projects, do depend upon this emerging funding strategy and working through it over the next number of months, on conclusion of which members will have to then take a look and say, well, how do we take this forward? Having made some of these decisions in due course in parallel with the rates estimates and in consultation with government, particularly in and around the rate support grant and the airport business case, we should then be in a position in a number of months to understand exactly what we can take forward and with what resources. So they are a very significant suite of papers, members. We have brought them to you today in as joined up and choreographed a manner as possible, so that we can and that you can consider them all in their round and understand the relationship between each of them. And so we are happy, members, as we go through the papers today, to take as many questions and comments which might relate to other elements of this as we go through the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, John, as well. And as you said, it's been a very ambitious programme of delivery, £75 million over the past couple of years, and obviously much more planned in terms of the developments right across this council area. And I think that's one of the things that struck out to me in the table, the 3.1 table that that Alfie indicated. You know, that these are projects and impacts that have had a positive contribution right across the Derry and Strabane area. A number of indicated speakers in the chat box, so I'll bring them in now. Councillor Doyle and then Councillor Duffy. Go ahead, Emmett.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Alfie and John as always. Two questions really. One is on the fleet investment. I know that I think it was just in my time that there was a policy agreed that we would effectively allow the fleet to last longer before we replaced vehicles. And I'm now seeing just in the report, I think it says that that there's going to be an annual cost to that. Can we get a bit more information just around, was that replacing vehicles that have already reached their end of life in the new policy that allows them to be used for longer? And two, I'm interested in terms of the rates implication with regards to the cut to the rate support grant. If we were to, hypothetically, if this cut was not reversed, do we have any modelling in place that will tell us how much, from a rates perspective, but also from a pounds and pence perspective, how much that would affect us negatively in the next number of years while we're still trying to deliver this capital investment? Thank you, Chair.
Chair, I might do my best to help answer some of those questions and then maybe bring Alfie in if that's okay. With regard to the fleet policy, so we do invest an annual amount in fleet, but it's a rolling sum, councillors. We keep our vehicle, depending on the nature of the vehicle, we keep them for a set number of years and replace them cyclically, whether that be 5 years, 6 years, or 7 years, depending on the nature of the vehicle. We are always looking to optimize that replacement cycle. But many of our vehicles do very, very high mileage and start incurring significant maintenance costs after a period of time. So that optimization is quite a fine balance. There's another issue, obviously, with regard to the whole health and safety issues of running vehicles longer. But in short, we do have a fleet management policy that keeps our vehicles as up to date as possible, while at the same time trying to maximize their usage and to ensure that we don't replace them too soon or too late in terms of overall value for money. I hope that answers your question, Councillor Doyle. And with respect to the rate support grant, we have done a lot of modelling around that. The key issue, members, with regard to the rate support grant, and this is something we've been trying to communicate as well to central government, because the money is a regular sum of money in non-financial layman's terms. Alfie could probably provide more detail around this. If we know that money is coming in and is guaranteed each year, we can use that money to borrow money for capital, almost in line with what you would do to buy a house. Use it as almost a mortgage payment to lever capital money. So the money that we receive as rate support grant, we can lever and turn it into many multiples of its current value to deliver many millions of pounds that will drive forward capital projects. Alfie's done a lot of modelling around this and can give us some figures in terms of what that looks like when it's cut, or indeed the opportunity that is lost when it is cut. And I don't know, Alfie, if you've got some of those figures at hand at the moment that you can quote.
Yeah, can, John. So obviously the sum of money at stake in relation to the rate support grant cut is currently 734,000. That's the amount that's been taken out of our budget. There's obviously a risk that that could increase further if there's further cuts to the grant, and obviously that would be an extremely critical position. So just to put that in context, if we were to use that sum to borrow over a 40-year period, for example, and you'll be aware that some of our projects are very significant projects that we would be borrowing over that period for, we're looking, members, of almost 15 million of impact. So that's 15 million of capital investment that we could deliver with that 734k amount if it remained within our budgets. Alternatively, members, if that cut was passed on to ratepayers, it's a direct 1.17% rates impact. So that's why the issue is obviously so critical, and why we're leading the charge on a regional basis to ensure it is reversed. Just building on what the Chief Executive says in relation to the fleet investment, we have an annual sum of 1.1 million that we use to replace our fleet. The default position is that the optimum period for replacing a vehicle, where there's obviously a trade-off between maintenance costs and the cost of buying the new vehicle, is about 7 years. At that point, the maintenance costs increase significantly. So we work to a default position of about 7 years, but obviously if a vehicle is still in good condition at that point, it certainly wouldn't be replaced. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, John and Alfie, for those answers. Councillor Duffy and then Alderman McClintock. Go ahead, Sandra.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, John and Alfie, for the report. I don't actually have any questions at this point because I was at the earlier briefing that we had last week, and it was quite a substantial briefing in terms of going through the issues. I have to say, though, and congratulations to all the team that have been involved in this. We have been a council of growth and delivery for our citizens since we came into being, so to speak. I mean, to see in black and white that we have delivered £72 million of projects is hugely significant, and we're not done yet. So to speak, we have major ambitions, and John, as you alluded to at the last meeting, that list is nearly growing on a monthly basis. So we do need to be looking at the strategy that we employ around trying to realise some of those ambitions. I suppose in terms of the business case for the airport, that will come to that at the next stage. But we also have the significant investment in terms of the city deed, the future fund, and we want to see all those things continue. So in terms of the rate support grant, it's not lost on us, Alfie. There's the significance of getting that restored, and we will continue as a party locally, certainly, to raise the issue on behalf of this council area, because we know that it's nearly key for a lot of our developments and how we move forward. In terms of rates, we are moving into that rates period, and as a party, we've never shied away from the difficult decisions that need to be made around rates, and we will certainly continue in that vein. We want to see growth continuing for this council area and for our citizens. They deserve nothing less. So we will, of course, continue our work on that. The airport business case, I'll come on to later, but it is nearly the key element of all this in terms of unlocking some of the council finances to deliver some of the stuff. And it's not just the community projects and play parks that we absolutely want to see. I'd be completely parochial around it. It's Templemore as a strategic leisure project that we need to see delivered for our city and district, along with Strabane. But you know, it's been sitting on a shelf for far too long, and our citizens deserve the state-of-the-art strategic leisure facilities that other areas have. So look, congratulations on the development that is already there, and let's just keep moving forward. We are a council of growth, so let's continue to grow. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Duffy. Alderman McClintock, go ahead. Hilary.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in, and thank you to Alfie and to John for the enormous amount of work that has gone on to bring us to this stage, and the solid leadership that both of you and the guidance that you give us in all these financial matters, which, to be honest, are way above above our understanding. And thank you for bringing it to us in terms that we can understand. We have fantastic and massive ambitions the fact that the £72 million in the last 5 or 6 years of projects and the ambition to, I think it was £446 million in the next couple of years, I think it's a testament to all the work and the vision that goes on within this council. And we are certainly at the forefront within the whole of Northern Ireland and our ambitions for our area. And like Councillor Duffy, I was at the detailed briefing, I think that was last week, so many meetings I can't remember, but I was at the detailed briefing, and I think the questions were well answered then, that were put to the officers. I think it's an exciting time for us as we now have got to this stage where these projects are about to come to fruition, because we've talked about them for so long. And obviously, we will be looking at some of the elements of this during the meeting today. And this is really the strategic overview, I suppose, of everything. So I'm certainly very happy to endorse the ongoing work to continue to scope and develop the financial strategy going forward. I think it's incumbent on all of us to use our influence within our own parties to make sure that our party colleagues in Stormont hear what we need to happen and what we wish to deliver in the Northwest, and to see how we can best go about it. So I'm not sure whether Councillor Duffy proposed the report. If she did, I'll second it. If not, I'm happy to propose it. And again, thank you for all the work that has gone into this so far.
Okay, thank you for that, Hilary. I don't think Sandra did propose it. Maybe I missed it if she did, but I'll accept you proposed it now if Sandra didn't. Councillor Doyle.
Chair, I'm happy to second it. Sorry.
Okay.
On that.
That's okay. Thanks, Sandra, for that. Okay, Councillor Doyle, your question. I think Alfie, I'm sure, will be happy to pick up with you on that directly about the rate support grant modelling. But I'll bring Alfie back in if he wants on that point in due course. And then next indicator speaker is Alderman McCready. Go ahead, Ryan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank the officers for the report. Delivery comes at a cost and liability, and trying to manage that is not easy. So, like Alderman McClenty's comments, the leadership shown to this point is commendable and exemplary. And when you consider the aspirations that we do have and the statutory increases that we have no choice but to cover when we come to the rates, or setting the rates, or striking the rates, then that leadership that has been shown with Alfie and John and their teams, it falls on us come at the beginning of next year to reciprocate that, so that we can have decisive, definitive leadership as members. Because when we look to shape these rates, it's likely that there will be an increase to some degree, and we have to manage that and accept that burden of decision making, that it falls on us and no one else. And so my ask to the team is, when we start shaping those definitive conversations on what that looks like, then as best you can, put us into that corner. So there's no ambiguity in terms of, if we are looking to set a particular rate and that results in a removal or reduction in service, then articulate that and hold us to account. And the other one of breaking that down, so that when we do come in, whether it's X, Y, or Z percentages, then explain that in a way that members can have nowhere to turn but to make those decisions, and there's no ambiguity with the public of what that means of an increase in rates, or alternatively, if it's something else, then what that impact is. So just looking to kind of shape the management of how we discuss impact on rates, whether it's up or down, and what is associated directly with that, and bring those recommendations forward, Alfie, on exactly if that means 2%, what does that mean? What do we need to decide to cut? So give us those options, and if you can, don't leave it to members to try and say, well, we should cut X, Y, and Z. Give us recommendations based on the reality of your numbers and the financial acumen that you have, because we rely heavily on it in order to make decisions. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Alfie and team.
Okay, thanks for that, Alderman McCready. Next indicator speaker, Councillor John Boyle. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Chair. Pardon me. Thanks to Alfie, thanks to John, thanks to all of the team for putting this report, and in fact subsequent reports that we're going to be going through in front of us this afternoon. In fact, Chair, I think it would be realistic enough to say, in fact, I think the Chief Executive even alluded to it himself, but you can nearly bundle up items 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, because we would be in danger of repeating ourselves here a little bit this afternoon. And I don't want to obviously ignore the very significant work and delivery that has been achieved since the inception of the Council in 2015. It has been phenomenally successful and extremely impressive. And I know that our citizens will have gained and benefited quite significantly from it. And I think the important thing from an SDLP perspective to say, and I'm kind of throwing some of the words from the report back here, and that is that we have to note the critical elements of the emergent funding strategy, namely the restoration of the rates support grant, and our hope that there will be an acceptance for the required financial support from the executive for City of Derry Airport that we're looking for. It's not an insubstantial amount, and it would make a significant difference to us. And that clearly falls within the remit of the Department for Finance, and then, as I understand it, the delivery vehicle for that would be the Department for Infrastructure. And rest assured, all of those on the meeting today will know that I have always pushed for this particular level of investment from regional government. I declared an interest in the board of City of Derry Airport earlier on, but it is critical, it is vital, and I think we all understand and appreciate the importance of the airport. But that's coming up in a paper in front of us. Just to say, I would also echo the words of Alderman McClintock in the sense that there are a number of ministers who could be on board with this, but I note from the appendices that Minister Lyons has, or his officials, seem to have removed him somewhat from the process, and I would encourage those who might be able to encourage Minister Lyons to have a rethink on that, because I actually don't think that's real. I don't think that's realistic, and he does have some degree of an overview and contribution that can be made, or his particular department. So I suppose we can say from an SDLP perspective that to some extent we can endorse the continuing work to progress with the financial plan, but it's a huge but, caveat, elephant in the room thing. In the absence of commitments or clarity on those two particular bullet points that I outlined, the rate support grant and the support for CODA, then we're probably going to have to hold our fire to some degree. And in the absence of those commitments and that particular clarity, we feel that they will form part of the future and the ongoing deliberations of the setting of the rates for the next financial year. And so we're taking this as noted. I note obviously that there's a proposal and a seconder for the paper in front of us. I took the papers in front of us, as I said, 7, 8, 9, 10, as more advisory notes than anything. Perhaps the Chief Executive could clarify that for me and for all of us. Certainly, we're perhaps getting a little bit cart before the horse if we do it any other way than take these as advisory notes. So I leave it at that for now, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Boyle, for that. I'm just
happy to clarify on the last point there by Councillor Boyle. Look, members, I don't want to comment on the whole suite of papers just at the moment. That would be a bit sweeping to say something general about the recommendations. But certainly in respect of this recommendation, we are not asking members to make a decision on a funding strategy, certainly not. But what we are clearly indicating at this point is that with the suite of ambition that we have as a council, this is the direction of travel in terms of a funding strategy to enable us to deliver it. And it has it has those elements set out in 4.3, and each of those elements are as important in order to deliver this. So there's the strategic piece around the airport, the strategic piece around the rate support grant, and the strategic piece around the rates commitment in the years ahead. So there is absolutely no requirement for members to take a vote on any of these issues today, but the recommendation is that members endorse the ongoing work and that we continue to scope and develop a financing and a funding strategy to ensure that we can deliver all of these projects. So it's to endorse the direction of travel for obviously future decision making by members depending on the outcome of the rates discussions and any of the broader discussions with regard to the airport and the RSG.
Okay, thanks for that, John and Alfie. Not just today, but also at the working group that was held a number of days ago as well, which was very useful, as well as today's paper in the public domain. Members, I'm not seeing any other indicated speakers. Can I thank everybody who has contributed on it so far, including obviously Alderman McClintock and Councillor Duffy for proposing and seconding it. So as we have no other indicated speakers, I'm happy to take that item as proposed and seconded, and to move on then to item 8, which, as others have said, a number of these items are interlinked, so they'll flow quite well together, I'm sure. So we'll move to item 8, and that's that back to yourself, John or Alfie.
No, I'm happy to take this one, Chair. And members, we obviously had a long discussion on this issue at the joint City Deal and Capital Working Group the other week as well. This is an exceptionally comprehensive report, one that we bring in at every milestone of the development of City Deal and indeed the wider strategic projects, because again, they are so interlinked. I'm not, you're glad to hear, I'm going to read through this verbatim, but I'll do my best to skip through some of the key points. The background is obviously that heads of terms were signed back in February. The medical school, the 3 centres of innovation excellence, and the 2 major regen projects, the regeneration of Derry Riverfront and the regeneration of Strabane Town Centre, are the cornerstone of the City Deal Stroke Future Fund programme. If we move quickly into the key issues, an overview is that at this stage, members, we're now in a process of developing the outline business cases. For heads of terms, we had to develop strategic outline cases. Now it's outline business cases. Once they are developed, they're submitted to government. There's a process of iteration on those, and they eventually then enter into a process that government calls casework, where the relevant government department will dissect every business case and will examine it in considerable detail, and will iterate that with council or the university if it happens to be one of their business cases, or Northwest Regional College or one of the other partners. So it's a very detailed part of the process, very time consuming, very resource intensive part of the process. And the objective is to arrive at the next milestone, which is currently known as a financial deal document. And at that point, the business cases have been approved, and letters of offer should then begin to be released for the significant projects. Hard to estimate how long that process is going to take, but we're currently targeting, as has been said before, approximately 2 years heads of terms, which would be the spring of 2023. And as I've said in the paper, just by point of comparison, Belfast is currently aiming to get to its financial deal this side of Christmas. And if they're successful in that, that would be about 2.5 years since they signed heads of terms. So that gives us a little bit of a comparison. It's a period where all of the project partners are progressing at risk. So the development of the OBCs, the resourcing of the OBCs, all of the costs associated with the development of all of that need to be met by the partner organisations, council and all of our various partners. And in parallel with this, members, as per our first paper, there are a number of key other strategic decisions that we will have to work on or take to optimise and maximise this opportunity. One of which is extensive traffic modelling and analysis in the city centre and quays of Derry, working with DFI in that, the objective of which is to ensure that we have future-proofed the scheme for many decades to come, and have prioritised public transport, walking, cycling, and built into this climate change and the green agenda. The second is a key decision with Ulster University on its expansion, and we'll talk about this as we go into the paper. And the third is in relation to the acquisition of lands in Strabane. And as we've just said, members, sitting alongside City Deal are the huge raft of other council projects, the community projects, and the really big strategic ones at Templemore and Strabane. And we're very keen to move these projects all at the same time. The scale of ambition there is enormous, and the growth story very significant for council. So in terms of governance, members, a lot of time has been spent on governance since the signing of heads of terms. There are papers that are attached in the appendices that set out all of the governance arrangements, the establishment of the City Deal Board, the project hub, the pillars, the pillar boards, the project boards. Council is the accountable body at this moment in time, certainly during this phase of the project. We have moved to agree all of those governance arrangements with our key delivery partners, with the government departments, with the UK government. We have populated those structures now with senior officers, either in council or across the partner organisations, and all of those governance structures are now up and running. And they dovetail with the regional structures that have been set up by the Northern Ireland Executive and the UK government, and they are progressing now at this stage. That in itself has been and continues to be an enormous piece of work. The resourcing of that, we're moving into section 3.3, as I've said earlier, is something that the money doesn't flow on any of these projects until we get past financial deal. So it does place a very considerable burden on all of the project partners to resource this. And as we progress through this, it's a big challenge. We have, however, adopted the principle that we have been successful to date because the entirety of City Deal, the entirety of the strategic projects have been a programme of work that we've taken forward, indigenous to council, integrated with everything else that we do in council, and indigenous right across the SLT and indeed this committee and the wider business of council. So I've been leading on a very extensive piece of work to look at how we do this, mostly internally, redesignation of senior officers, additional responsibilities, providing opportunities for officers at lower levels within the organisation, providing them with pathways to get involved in some of the strategic work to progress their careers, to look at how the talent within the organisation can contribute to all of this, and where we have gaps to work with SIB to help get some additional project management resource in. And obviously we've just undertaken a very significant recruitment exercise to bring in additional staff as well. All of that, members, feeds into the funding strategy that we've just discussed, the resourcing of all of this, without which we will find it difficult to advance. We have achieved some additional funding from both DFC and SIB in the tune of 125 and 250,000 respectively, which we're applying to the procurement of some specialist resourcing to do with, for example, a structural assessment of Queen's Quay, traffic modelling, things like that. But members, we've talked about this before, and it's very important that we understand that the government departments at this stage are not structured, nor are they resourced to work with us on the scale that we require. And this is a conversation that we're having at the moment with senior officers within government departments, with permanent secretaries, and indeed with SIB. We have figured a workaround to this that will take us through the OBC stage. We have enough commitment from those departments to work with us through the OBCHT stage that will enable us to progress. But we are rapidly in a situation where we need very senior, dedicated resources from both, in particular, DFI and DFC, to work with the city and its partners to develop these projects going forward. And a very important stream of work for us over the next number of months will be to try to work with those government departments and SIB to ensure that that happens, members, and we will need your full support to try to get that over the line. Section 3.4, the projects themselves. Without going into any detail, every project at this stage is now moving forward in some shape or fashion towards preparing details that will enable the outline business cases to be drafted. So Ulster have a team working on their 3 projects. The Western Health are working on theirs. Northwest Regional College is working on its. And we in council, together with partners, are working on the 2 regeneration projects. There's a wealth of detail below that, members, but at this stage, suffice to say, there's an extraordinary amount of work now kicking off with regard to all of that. The objective is to get first draft OBCs for the innovation projects probably by the spring of 2022. And first draft of the regen OBCs probably by the summer of 2022, to get those into the system, to get those into government, and to begin that casework process so that we come out of this in the spring of 2023, as I've just mentioned, hopefully with approval. The enabling projects are worth spending a moment on, members. Section 3.5, 3 things. The traffic enabling project, the university issue, and the Strabane Canal Basin regen. Working with DFI to get this traffic modelling done. Very significant traffic modelling, looking at a vision and a strategy that will put public transport at the heart of how this city works to enable that major regen project along the quays to be taken forward. Reduction in road space, car parking strategy, public transport strategy, public realm strategy to create places and spaces in the city that provide a well-being future for our citizens and visitors that is second to none on these islands, and to also provide an atmosphere where tourism, business and leisure can flourish in those spaces. So that's a vitally important piece of work that is underway in parallel, and without which we couldn't do the OBCs. The second element is the commitment by Ulster University in relation to the Strand Road site that I sit on today, the site adjacent to the council building and the site of the council building itself, both for the development of the new medical school and the Thrive project, but also the other innovation projects and future expansion of the university. It's been a key pivotal component part of our city deal that the university projects would be an integral part of the regeneration projects along the riverfront, and that they aren't 2 separate divorced projects. As I reported to full council a number of meetings ago, the university have now strategically committed to the acquisition of these sites, and we've begun a non-prejudicial conversation with them around how we might advance that, considering moving towards a heads of agreement as to what that might look like, how it would take place, when it would come into effect. And we'll bring all of this to you in very early draft stage for consideration in the coming months. Very important to reinforce to you that these discussions are formulating a way forward in this, and we certainly will not be advancing on any of this without bringing some of the detail to you. But it's exceptionally good news that they have committed to that strategic acquisition, and that we can now begin to plan in earnest for what could be the biggest transformational project that the city has ever seen, in coupling the taking forward of the innovation and health projects with the regeneration projects. The Strabane Canal Basin Regeneration Project is as transformational to Strabane as the riverfront one is to Derry. The single biggest ever potential injection of new money into the centre of Strabane that has ever happened. And we as a council have been at the forefront of devising that, promoting that, and bringing project partners around the table. It is, members, as you can probably imagine, a hugely complex project. The land acquisition in itself, the identification of who owns pockets of land, and how we acquire those pockets of land going forward is a massive exercise in itself. And we can't ignore the fact that there are pockets of land there that, should we be in a position to acquire them early, members might want to consider that in due course to de-risk the scheme as we go forward. So those three issues are three pivotal issues that we must move in parallel with the OBCs. In relation to Section 4, the report itself deals inherently with most of the financial issues, but just to say that the climate change issue is at the heart of all of these projects going forward. The sustainability of the projects, the employability and skills issues associated with the projects form a strand of work that is equal to the development of the capital projects. There really is such a comprehensive wraparound in terms of trying to get this right from day one. We are talking about a 10-year program of work of over £250 million, and when you add the other projects to it, probably close to £500 million of work over the next 5 to 10 years. So, members, a lot in that, a lot to digest, but I hope it provides for you a very strong reassurance on the progress, sets out clearly the key issues. The recommendations are to continue to support the development and find solutions to the key challenges as outlined in the report, particularly in relation to the resourcing and funding. I mean, that is probably our vital point today going forward. Not only our own funding strategy, but also engaging with government to ensure that it is adequately resourced to play its part in this going forward. But also to endorse all the other aspects of the report in relation to the governance arrangements, the projects and business case development, and the advancement of the 3 parallel projects, the major traffic modelling piece, the development of the University Strand Road Foy Street site piece, and the potential of progress on some of the land issues in Strabane Town Centre. So, Chair, I tried not to go into huge detail, but to pick out the main points and open and pass it back to members for consideration and comment.
Okay, thanks very much, John, for that and for quite a lengthy presentation there of something that's of huge significance, not just to our council area, but to the entire Northwest. And there's quite a lot of indicated speakers in the chat box already, so I'll move to bring those in. I have Councillor Boyle, then Councillor Heaney, then Councillor Doyle, then Councillor Farrell, and then Alderman McCready. So go ahead, John.
Okay, Martin, that was actually from the previous discussion, so we moved on. If you want to move on to the next speaker.
Sorry, John, I thought that was from this one. Okay, sorry about that. Councillor Heaney, go ahead, Connor.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, John, for that presentation. And I'm happy to propose this item, Chair, if you want. I sort of have two main points. One is a comment, and the other is a question for John. Just the comment is in relation to the governance section of this, and it's particular reference to the pillar program boards that cover the main areas of digital, health, innovation, regeneration, tourism, and skills and employability. And just to make the point, and before I even make the point, to declare an interest, as I work in the employability sector. But the point is that there needs to be community buy-in to this whole process as well. So I would encourage, in terms of the governance structures, that there's community sector involvement in those, as they're established and they make them function, so that there's a connection between the areas in the city that all these projects are aimed at assisting and helping and growing. So that's the first sort of comment. The question is in relation to the section 3.5.4, the 3.5.8, which is to do with McGee's move down into the Strand Road, which is a real welcome development and a further sign of the development of the university and bringing the university right down to the riverfront. So that's extremely positive. But the questions relation to the council offices themselves and the suggested move then up to closer to the Guildhall at the Forest Street site, and just to ask John just for where that process is at and what are the plans. And I assume that is going to be a new capital build to facilitate that. So just to get further information on that end of it from John, please. Thanks, Chair.
Yep, thanks for that, Connor. I'll bring in a number of speakers and I'll bring back in John and Alfie and other officers. Next indicated speaker is Councillor Doyle. Go ahead, Emma.
Thanks, Martin, and thanks to John, as usual, for the report. One of the things that has been raised with me about this report over the last number of days is the PQQ for the Central Riverfront work, John. And I know it's got a value of 65 million. Obviously, very complex piece of work. But obviously, we want as much as possible to be able to ensure that local businesses can avail of tender opportunities. And one of the things that I've got the PQQ in front of me here, and in terms of a scoring indicator for the lead economic operator, it says in terms of a pass that the consultant has demonstrated relevant city and riverfront design and placemaking experience. Now, my understanding from the number of individuals that raised this with me, that those expertise would even be difficult to find in Belfast. So have we put, I suppose, bigger question is, have we put too much into the requirements in terms of the riverfront development, in terms of the PQQ? Is there a way that we can ensure that local businesses, and I mean that in terms of a construction aspect of things, are able to avail of these types of projects at that level? Because it would seem to me that this would exclude any businesses that I'm certainly aware of that wouldn't necessarily have that experience in terms of riverfront development. And I'm very keen that we have a look at that while the PQQ is still open. Be interested to hear your view on that, John. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Emmett. Councillor Farrell, Rory, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks to the Chief Executive for the very comprehensive report on what's a highly complex and highly complicated suite of strategic projects. I'm sure that each one of them will bring an amazing benefit to this city and district. And I'd like to personally thank John and the team for their diligence, persistence and professionalism displayed so far. So on behalf of the SDLP, happy to endorse progress to date. But I've got a specific question around the medical school. So I note the reference to the medical school and UU's indication that they're interested in acquiring our site on the Strand Road and adjacent lands, and then the subsequent move to the Foyle Street site if things come to pass. I also note that discussions are ongoing with UU in that regard, and I note that the business case for the Permanent School of Medicine is currently sitting with the Department for the Economy. As everybody knows, the medical school opened in September. We've got the first cohort of students and they're being housed in temporary accommodation at McGee. So the first cohort is there. The second cohort is going to be there next September. The third cohort is going to be there in September 23. And when we reach 2024, we're going to have an entire School of Medicine and potentially no permanent School of Medicine. So I feel that successful resolution seems to be very time sensitive. So there's a lot of things that need to be done. The business case needs approved by DFE. We need to reach an agreement with UU in terms of this land acquisition. Designs need to be finalised, planning needs to be approved, and then construction of new council offices at Foyle Street and the new Permanent School of Medicine at the Strand Road site needs to happen. So my question is, what timescales are we working to at the minute in terms of those discussions with UU? Do we envisage this done by 2024, or do you think it's something that's going to be a lot further down the line? Thank you.
Thanks for that, Rory. Next indicated speaker is Alderman McCready, and then I have Maurice Devaney. So I'll go ahead, Ryan, and then Alderman Devaney.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks very much for the report. And what was helpful was our session a couple of weeks ago, just as a primer, absolutely invaluable. So whenever I read through this, I try and understand kind of key risks and burden, specifically on the council, but also anything which extends to the entire city deal and then future inclusive funds. So between now and going through the ongoing OBC developments to get to the point where we've got a financial deal, no money's being released from city deal or future inclusive funds. So I know you've done an awful lot of work and you've articulated this as well, that us as council, we can seek what we have, put out new positions for HR and have some of the funding to offset that as a key strategic partner. But I've got a question on the kind of other aspect of this and the impact. So with our strategic partners that you've mentioned, they have to go through the same workup with the same gaps, or potentially looking to fund it, to source it, to get their OBCs to a point where they can be put forward for ministerial approval to have that financial deal done. What risk and where's the liability if, well, fundamentally, what's the assurances on those strategic partners to have those funds, resources to continue on this, to get to that financial deal done? Because I'm happy with us as a council, but I don't have that great level of assurances on the other partners until they get to that financial deal. So I see that as a risk, and because we are we hold the can per se, then it should come in the next Governance and Strategic Planning Committee, an update on the assurances of the other stakeholders up until the point to the financial deal done. And other than that, thanks very much for the progress and the update. I agree with some of the points raised there about medical school, the implications or ramifications on accommodation, the time frame, and the lack of decisive decision making at the assembly for some of this. We just need to keep pushing on and lobby where we can, folks. Thanks, Chair, and thank you, John.
Okay, thanks, Ryan, for that. And then Alderman Devaney, go ahead, Morris.
You, Chair, for allowing me in, and on behalf of our party, the DUP, we have no problem in supporting and endorsing the recommendation here. Well done to John and the team once again. Discussed a whole suite of programs, very, very ambitious ones. But I do agree with some of the previous speakers here. I do believe it's vitally important that we have community buy-in, so we have that connection with the community, and we're bringing them on board along with us. Yes, the previous speaker raised issues and around the stakeholders, whether that be departments or partners. I think, look, they need to be buying in now to this program, and I know John, you will be pushing hard on this that they do get buy-in, and we as public representatives of each relevant parties here on council should be pushing our MLAs and the assembly for support for this. And look, I was just going to ask a question and around the new council offices and the new build, and it's it's good to hear that McGee would be moving down to where you're sitting now, John. But I have a wee bit of concern in the time it would take us to move out of there and move to the new site, and look at funding and around the planning process and all of that there. But well done, John, to you and the team, and fully support the recommendation to endorse.
Okay, thanks for that, Alderman Devaney. So, John, you have quite a number of indicated speakers that have put on record their various different supports for this, and obviously attracted in a number of questions as well. So, I'll hand back to yourselves to try and field some of those points now, if you can.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for your comments and support as well, and positive comments. And I'll try and do justice to some of the questions that you've asked me. Councillor Heaney, firstly, with regard to the community buy-in and the community sector involvement, Councillor Heaney, absolutely vital. We have two pillars that are funded through City Deal, and those are the capital projects that lead to innovation and regeneration. But we have devised our governance arrangements to have a third pillar, which sits at the heart of those governance arrangements, which is the skills and employability pillar, that is not directly funded through City Deal, but is an inherent part of our governance structures. And it's through that programme pillar that we'll be engaging with the community, our community partners, and our other skills providers, partners, in a co-designed partnership to ensure that we maximise the benefits of these projects from those perspectives. And we'll have obviously many more discussions around those in the months and years ahead, but it's absolutely at the heart of the design arrangements for the programme and the project. A number of questions in relation to the Strand Road site, the Foyle Street site, and the medical school. So maybe just trying to deal with those in one kind of suite. Where is it at? Well, firstly, members, we've been trying to, I call it a jigsaw. It is the most ambitious jigsaw that we've ever tried to put together. You reflected at the start of this process, we reflected at the start of this process many years ago, that we were trying to add considerable value to what we were bringing through City Deal. And therefore we have put together this very complicated suite of projects that all lever off one another, the sum of which will be a very significant transformation. And so they all are interdependent upon one another. The university has just within the last few months taken that decision to strategically commit to the riverfront site. They hadn't done that before. They had indicated that they would, but they hadn't done it. And so we couldn't take forward with any great sense of certainty or urgency the Foyle Street site. And if truth be told, we still can't. until some of those pieces of the jigsaw come into play, which takes us back to the first paper. Until we're clear on the funding strategy, until we're certain of how we might fund all of this going forward, it's very difficult to advance any one part of it, but to move it all in parallel toward a point where we can map out the entire picture and then take it forward. But at this moment in time, with regard to the Foyle Street site, we have been working with DFC to scope A, is the site sufficient? B, is the site available to us? And C, what impact a development of that nature would have on the regeneration of the lower part of the city centre. And it's very clear, members, that if we're taking forward a major development in Foyle Street, a major development on the Strand Road site, and a major development in the Wall City and Riverfront, the catalytic impact of the totality of those projects will be very significant. So it is a jigsaw. It does require a lot of pieces falling into the right place. In terms of the university commitment and the medical school, the medical school preferred site is the site adjacent to the council building. So it does not require the council offices to have moved to enable that project to start on site. It does require a commitment that the university will acquire the totality of the site, and it does require a commitment by the council to eventually move, because we can't afford to be landlocked in the site that we're in. But in terms of actually moving the medical school project on, it can move independently of those other parts of the project. And we've designed it in such a way that that can happen. So that does mean that the medical school, and indeed the Thrive Innovation Project, which will be built as part of that building, can start to move into design, development, planning and construction as soon as the final business case is approved by the Department for the Economy. And that final business case, as one of the members has said, is currently with the Department for the Economy. The other thing to note, members, is that we have constructed the financial model so that the medical school and the Thrive projects are funded from the Future Fund, not the City Deal. And we have sought assurances from government that projects funded under Future Fund can move ahead when they are ready, as opposed to waiting for the totality of the projects to be approved by council, which is the normal for City Deal. The normal for City Deal is that all projects must be approved at the same time, and you can only move as fast as the slowest project. Whereas we have constructed this, that we can move as fast as the fastest project, and that the medical school can move ahead straight away. So I can't give you a time for the construction of the medical school at this stage, but what I can say is we've constructed the financial model, the governance model, and the site acquisition model to enable it to move as quickly as it can. And once we get through the process of engagement with DFE on the finance, we will then move to working with Ulster to put in place a delivery timeframe for that, in parallel with our funding strategy that will enable us to move to Foyle Street. So I hope that answers those questions, and of course there are many more issues to be discussed in relation to that. And with regard to the absolutely appropriate comment with regard to the engagement of local firms, we must first of all design our processes in accordance with procurement guidance. I don't think, members, you would think it's unreasonable for a project of the scale of £65 million not to seek firms that have experience in developing projects of that scale. Our ambition is to have a waterfront, a riverfront that is the envy of any city in Western Europe, and we do need the firms with the greatest experience to work with us on this. What I would say is that the opportunity for local firms exists in partnering with bigger firms because they can bring so much to such a design process. And that's the norm in situations like this, where local firms and larger firms begin to partner to submit submissions under such a process. The other thing I would say is that at this stage, all we are procuring at this moment are consultancy services to take us through the OBC stage. There will be numerous and multiple and much bigger procurement processes to follow. So this will enable local firms to begin to build some capacity. And of course, as time progresses, we will map out the types of opportunity that will exist so that local firms can begin to see what's coming and begin to understand how they might benefit from those opportunities. In relation to the point raised around risks and our strategic partners, yes, they are also having to take those risks in funding the resourcing requirement for the OBCs at risk at the moment with no source of funding. We have an assurance from the project partners that they are working to those timeframes. They are part of the City Deal Board, and we have developed and are developing a risk register around each of the projects that will flag up where projects are falling behind or are not being properly resourced, or for some reason they're running into difficulties. So at this moment, I have absolute assurance from our project partners. The evidence that I see is that our project partners, and there are three, as I said, Ulster, Western Health, and Northwest Regional College, they are working at pace with regard to their OBCs. They have applied significant resource to them, but our risk register will monitor that, and that forms a cornerstone of our governance arrangements, and will hopefully flag up where there are problems with that as we progress. Chair, I hope that I've dealt with most of the questions there, but obviously happy if I haven't to take supplementaries.
Yep, no, thank you for that, John. There is a question in the chat box coming in, or an indication of a question from John Boyle. So go ahead, Councillor Boyle.
Thank you. Yeah, Chair. Thanks, Martin. I'll keep it brief. Where in the mix then are TransLink in all of this, or is it DFI, or I'm just trying to figure that one out. Evidently, TransLink occupy a very significant city centre location at the minute, which is, I don't know, around or adjacent to, or perhaps even part of the future plan for all of this. I mean, I'm scoping it out in my own head, and I can see that we're looking at a change in roads and all manner of things potentially on the riverfront.
Thank you. Chair, do you want me to take that now? Hello?
Yes, John, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. Yeah, back to the piece I said in and around the three parallel enabling projects. The traffic analysis, traffic modelling, public transport modelling, future public transport vision for the city. If we don't advance that now in parallel with the OBCs, we won't have a project. We won't have a meaningful regeneration project. So we've had to engage with DFI and the component parts of DFI, of which TransLink is one, to ensure that they're embedded in this process. And they currently are. They are currently working with us on it, and that extends everything from the future reshaping of the road network, the future provision of public transport, and indeed, as you've outlined, Councillor Boyle, the potential relocation of the bus station as part of a suite of projects that will dovetail into this. So at this moment in time, TransLink are around the table and part of the conversation. But members, as I've outlined in the paper, and I'll just say again, the two big government departments, DFI and DFC, have such a huge part to play in the success of this, that we really do need a significant ramp up in resourcing of senior people within those government departments to work with us. We as a council can only take so much forward. As a matter of fact, we're probably going way, way beyond our own powers and limitations in trying to resource this at the moment. While we have commitment right now from TransLink, DFI, DFC, and others, that does, in terms of resourcing risk, remain our highest area of concern, and is a key focus for discussion with government departments in the months ahead.
Okay, yeah, thanks very much for that, John. And indeed, thanks to everyone for the comments. I suppose from my own point of view, and I made this point at the recent working group as well. You know, I think that as well as the public footprint that will be impacted significantly in terms of public spend and public existing structures and future structures, hand in hand with that, to maximize the value of that public investment, we do need to have associated private investment as well in relation to this. And I think that the publication of this scheme and the fact that that there will be significant investment by the public sector can act as a magnet and an impetus to private sector investment as well. And we only need to look at parts of the water side, for example, to see the amount of investment that's happening in the water side in terms of new housing, in terms of investment in existing infrastructures by the private sector. And I think that we have to, in some way, capture the value of that private sector investment in terms of the success of a city deal in due course, because it would be a lost opportunity, I think, if we were to only look at the delivery of this in terms of the public spend, because the citizens right across the city area will benefit greatly from the added interest in our council area by private operators who want to come and invest in their own infrastructure and their own opportunities, as well as what the public sector is doing as well.
Chair, that's just picking up on that point. That's a vital point, a very, very important point that you've just mentioned. And actually, we need to do this during the development of the OBCs. The OBCs won't be passed by government unless we can demonstrate the level of private sector investment that will follow or be attracted. So it's actually work that has to take place straight away, and is part and parcel of the development of the OBCs. So it is a vital point that you raise, and without that additionality that comes from private sector investment, there's really very little point in doing any of this. So it's at the core of what we're trying to take forward.
Okay, thanks for that, Chief Executive. So at the beginning, the first indicated speaker was Councillor Heaney, and he was happy to propose it. I'm not sure if I had a formal seconder, but again, as with previous items, nobody spoken against this, so I'm quite content.
I'll second here, Councillor Farrell.
Okay, thanks for that, Rory. Happy to take that as agreed unanimously. Members, it's now just past 6 o'clock, so we'll take a comfort break for 10 minutes, and we'll resume again now just at about coming up into 6:15 on item 9. So we'll take a wee break for 10 minutes and see us all back soon. Thank you. Okay, members, we're just coming up to 1:15, so let's give everybody a minute to settle back down at their seats, and when ready, we'll kick off again with item 9, which is the Strategic Leisure Centre Investment Project for Strabane site and Templemore site, pages 85 to 90 in the pack. So I'm going to hand over to the officers to introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the paper on the Strategic Leisure Investment Programme has been circulated for your consideration, and we're asking you to note the update on progress, the next steps and the associated timelines, along with the indicative financial position, which will be subject to a more detailed report in early 2022. And also members to advise that we are actively recommencing the design team services to progress to the next phase of design within the week. And finally, members, just to advise that the development of a strategic framework for sport and physical activity for the delivery of an integrated approach combining both facilities, programmes and amenities as part of a wider leisure offer is ongoing. By means of background, we have appointed a design team Hamiltons who have been working on the design phases, taking those forward to REBA Stage 2, and an outline business case has been completed. The design development phase at this point has been paused whilst Council consider the associated strategic capital financing and resourcing requirements. And members, there has been significant consideration given to that wider strategic framework this evening, and also to the wider alignment of place-based initiatives, which will set the context for the range of facilities that we will provide as part of our new leisure development. The business case at this point presents a formal analysis of the most viable options and the financial implications which are being considered separately as part of the capital financing report. We are intending to provide a widened scope and offer within the facility mix analysis. Collectively, the facilities across both sites will include swimming pools with configurations for general and club use, toddler teaching and leisure use, multi-purpose sports halls, fitness suite and spa facilities, multi-purpose studios, village changing, play, cafe and ancillary facilities. And members, it's to advise that we have commenced the review process for both design and the business case. It is intended that we will take forward this in parallel with the process of consultation with users, with community groups and other interests. Members were minded of the need to take into account the Council's obligations in terms of equality, rural needs, climate change and data protection, and the process by which we will take that forward is outlined in the report. Equally so, members, the capital financing report has set out the overall financial implications and further key considerations in terms of an investment to save process. Charging and income review will also be taken forward. Members, in terms of the Strabane project, there are some additional lands required to support the development. There's an active process in place to take that forward, and this will be reported on subsequently to Chamber. Members, in summary, the recommendations are asking you to note the update on the Strategic Leisure Investment Programme, the indicative financial position subject to a further report in mid-22, and our intent to recommence the design team processes over the coming week. Thank you, members.
Okay, thanks very much, Karen, for presenting the paper. A couple of indicated speakers, so straight to Councillor Duffy and then Councillor Farr. Go ahead, Sandra.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Karen, for the report. And I know that I previously received it at the Capital Working Group, but I do want to welcome the progress. I think that we have really needed to see some progress on our strategic leisure, and I will be parochial again and talk about Templemore. It has been a priority for Sinn Féin as a party in terms of getting delivery and getting some movement on it. I have expressed concern around raising expectations and raising the belief that it is moving forward without any tangible ability to do so. But I do think that what has been presented here as a plan that we can move it forward in conjunction with the other reports that we have received here today. I think that, I mean, it has a significant investment of 70 million. But I think that the citizens of this city and district deserve no less. They need the strategic leisure that it is going to be delivered in terms of this project, in terms of design and the facilities that it will contain. I just hope that we don't go out to consultation for it to sit on a shelf again, because I don't think we will be forgiven for doing that. But I do really welcome the progress on it and hope to see movement on strategic leisure, particularly Templemore, for myself in the coming months. So thank you, Karen. Happy to propose.
Okay, thanks, Sandra, for that. Rory, go ahead, Councillor Farrell.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Karen, for the report. Obviously, the replacement of Templemore and Riversdale are key ambitions for our council. The existing buildings and facilities there are sadly beyond their sell-by date and in need of an urgent upgrade. The indicative costs are £70 million, and obviously that's a challenge for our council. You know, we've talked about finance, you know, for the last 2.5 hours nearly. But it's one that we must meet. So I welcome the indication that a finalised capital forecasts are going to be available by the middle of next year. And I further welcome the indication that we're going to progress to spatial coordination and technical designs. As Sandra said, there's been a lot of frustration locally with failure to progress a redesign and a new build at Templemore, but this is progress and it's welcome progress. But I have a question. In the paper, it says we're advancing to REBA stage 3. And I've looked at the REBA plan of work, and it says stage 3 is spatial coordination and that stage 4 is technical design. So just in the interest of clarity, are we progressing to technical design? And if so, do we have timescales for the finalisation of that? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rory, for those questions. I'll bring in the next indicated speaker before I go back to officers. Councillor McHugh. Rory, go ahead.
Good, Martin. Much in the same vein as my party colleague there, Councillor Duffy, obviously endorsed the report and welcome the report and welcome the progress to the next stage, albeit, you know, it seems to be going at a very slow pace, but it's good to see that's being revisited again. Been a lot of talk there earlier. The meeting, I was listening intently just to John and Alfie, and you know, about the potential for projects to transform areas of the district, and like Councillor Duffy being parochial, with Strabane being next to my own area, and Karen would be well aware that, you know, this has been on the pipeline for a long time, even since, you know, the Legacy Council. So obviously I will be championing that project and welcome the progress to the next stage. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor McHugh, and thanks to Councillor Farrell for seconding it in the chat box. I'll go back to officers now in relation to responding to some of the points raised. Either Karen or the Chief Executive, whoever wants to come in.
Chair, I'm happy to come in initially and thank Karen for presenting the report, and Karen can obviously supplement any of the comments that I make. Just to be clear on where we're at with this, members, we would dearly love to be in a position where we're advancing these projects now with pace. We have actually brought them to a considerably advanced point, but we can't advance them without a funding strategy. Brings us back to paper number 1. What we're proposing today is, you know, things have changed so much in the last year or two that we need to undertake this review to review costs in particular, which have skyrocketed over the last number of months. These cost estimates are quite old at this point, so will rise probably quite significantly to enable us to develop that funding strategy that we've just talked about. And so we have no intention of going out to wider public consultation with this, members, until we get to the point where you have approved a funding strategy and you have approved us to take it forward to the next stage. Otherwise, we would be creating another false dawn with these projects. And so we're trying to get to a point where we provide you with all of the information necessary to take those decisions. With regard to the technical point that you've raised, Councillor Farrell, I'm a bit old school with regard to phase 3 and phase 4. It used to be called stage C and stage D. My understanding of this is that we are at stage C, and we are revising the proposals to get an updated stage C position, or what is now called stage 3, which is the projects are scoped. We broadly know the shape, scale, nature, size of them, facilities mix, the cost, all of those key issues. Once you approve beyond that point, you then move into detailed design, detailed planning, all of that. If we are at a point when we revise stage 3, that the funding strategy comes together and you approve us to proceed, we will then sit with the consultants and work out a time frame to take this forward. Because we've already taken it to stage C or stage 3, at that stage, we will have advanced considerably, and will be a year or two into what would be a multi-year program for design and development. Karen, I don't know if you want to add to any of that or not.
No, I think that's a comprehensive technical review of where we're at. I suppose the end of stage 3 is our next review point in the programme, and moving beyond that, at that stage we'll be committing to build what we have designed, to provide what we have costed, and to ensure that we have adequate budget provision in place to take that forward. So that's why we have indicated that will be the next review point. We'll keep that updated, members, obviously, as wider approvals proceed as part of your other financial discussions.
Okay, thank you very much, Karen, for that, and also John. So being proposed by Councillor Duffy, seconded by Councillor Farrell, and obviously no one has indicated any opposition to it, so happy to take that as approved and move on to item 10, which is the DNA project update.
Thank you, Chair. It's myself, Aidan McCarter, taking this paper. Members, the purpose of this report is to update you on the progress of the DNA project and to seek your approval to proceed with a number of identified works to de-risk the project. You'll be aware of the background, or many of you will be, that a strategic review was carried out and submitted to you in February 2019 on the advice of Tourism Northern Ireland, and you approved to update the full business case for the project in September 2019. The strategic review gave the clear link to the city deal and named the project in the tourism appendix of the Central Riverfront Regeneration Project strategic outline case. It has since been confirmed that the balance of funding required to complete the overall DNA funding shortfall will be provided by the Northern Ireland Executive Inclusive Future Fund as part of the wider city deal package. This replaces funding originally identified from Tourism Northern Ireland and Council, and the updated funding table members has set out in the report. As already referenced in this meeting, it is hoped, and as the Chief Executive has pointed out, we have sought assurances that the Inclusive Future Fund can flow in advance of the wider city deal proposal. And that's obviously key for this project as well, to ensure that letters of offer from other funders can be realised and that the project can commence. And it's on this basis that we're proceeding with the project. The business case was revised as it became clear there was a need to consolidate Council's museum offer from the Tower to the DNA, so that the Tower Museum building could be utilised for other city deal tourism and regeneration projects. As a result, the business case considered 6 options, with the most preferable option being a migration of 50% of the Tower Museum content, with a view to the Tower Museum being repurposed. That was presented as the most beneficial and approved by members. Since then, the full business case has been updated by Grant Thornton this past few weeks, and obviously due to COVID and Brexit considerations, Tourism NI have also instructed CPD cost consultants and Cogent NI to review the full business case. It's scheduled to be appraised and brought to the Tourism Northern Ireland Board in January of 2022, will be followed by Department for the Economy and Department for finance approval before hopefully ministerial sign off in March. The full schedule is set out in the report, but it's with a view to works commencing in November 22 and the museum itself opening in spring of 2025. So there are a number of items now that have been identified that we require to move on immediately. These are listed in the report and set out, but they include that following the inspection of building 45 and 46, additional works, the ICT team have identified additional works to 2 elements which will require new planning permission and listed building consent. HED have advised they're willing to engage in pre-application. The works required, the detail is set out in the report, but they are necessary at this stage. There's also a requirement to carry out an archaeological survey works on the site designated for the museum, and it would be prudent to progress this element at this stage in advance of any works happening on the site. So the interpretative design element of the project was paused without completion of REBA Stage 3, as the project board agreed to introduce, as I've just said, 50% of the Tower Museum stories into the DNA as part of the new focus to the project. This work now needs to be delivered in order to finalise the interpretive design stage to REBA Stage 3. So when the decision was taken to migrate the content from the Tower to DNA, it strengthened the offering that will be available in DNA, and the story tells the region's strategic role in historic maritime events, which really tells the key stories of the city and district. But to complete the migration of the collections, additional design work is required to incorporate this content into the gallery designs, layout concept and interpretation programme. So this will require gallery by gallery review of the display cases and interpretive narrative. Completion of this work is critical to ensure that this element is in step with the wider ICT programme, and it's intended to have this work completed by April 2022. This will allow for a more coordinated, consistent approach to the project in line with the proposed formal recommencement as in spring of 2022, and keep the project on track. The other funders are not in a position to fund these works until the full business case is approved, hopefully early next year. Therefore, Council are being asked to fund these costs currently. The cost and the detail of the costs is set out in the report, but they total 82,753, obviously with the majority of those being in the interpretive design fees required to update the galleries to incorporate the tower and the revised gallery plan. This paper is obviously requesting authorisation to complete the actions to de-risk the project and allow the progress to meet the outlined programmes. It's funded from already approved capital funding by members. These costs will form part of Council's contribution towards the project, bringing the overall Council contribution of the project to 555,000 as identified in 2.1 above. This funding has already been earmarked and provided for within Council's capital budget for 21-22 and previous years. As previously advised, once operational, the project will have additional ongoing annual revenue implications, members, over and above the current museum budget. The additional rates requirement are set out in the table in the report. And as noted in the separate report to today's committee, these costs have been identified as part of the medium-term capital funding strategy. It's critical they're approved to allow the project to advance. National Lottery Heritage Fund will provide a contribution towards these costs, totalling 600,000 for 3 years up to March 2028. The above figures do not include realised savings from the closure of the Workhouse Museum and the Foyle Valley Railway due to the consolidation of Council's museum offering, which equated to 142,000. Council are currently exploring options, as you may be aware, for the repurposing of the Tower Museum, and they will obviously be brought to you members as soon as there's a decision to be taken around that. Members, you're asked to note the report and to approve the decision to proceed with the spend as outlined to de-risk the DNA project.
Aidan, thanks very much for that comprehensive presentation, and you've attracted in a number of interested speakers, so I'll bring them in the order that they're there. So Councillor Farr, then Alderman McCready, then Councillor Fleming, and then Alderman McClintock. Go ahead, Rory.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Aidan, for the report. To be honest, I'm disappointed with this update on the DNA Maritime Museum. It's been discussed a number of times at business and culture over the last number of years. We were told in May that the business case was submitted to DFC and that, Department for the Economy and DFC and the Executive Office had sight of it prior to that submission. Now we see that another business case had to be done in November, and then there's additional work has been identified, and that needs planning permission, and it needs listed building consent, and it needs archaeological surveys. The end result is further delays, and I know Michelle O'Neill said on the floor of the Assembly that she thought it was going to be open by 2024, and it's now going to be 2025 based on these timescales. DNA will be transformative for our tourism offer when it opens. It's going to be a further attraction to entice visitors to the Northwest. But I would reiterate that I'm disappointed that there's going to be a further year that we don't have it operational in Edmonton. But better late than never, I would say. There's no formal recommendation on the paper, in fairness, but I'm happy to propose it on behalf of the SLP. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Farrell. Alderman McCready.
Thanks, Chair. I will happily second the authorisation of the particulars set out in 4.4, that additional expenditure. And Aileen, I'd just like to say thanks very much for preparing the report, managing and updating members. So thanks for that. But I must say and admit, like previous speaker, and another year of a delay is disappointing. I know that there's some retrospective view on this, on the consolidation of our museums, which will be great in the long run. I know there's a necessity there, and to maybe just ploy on, and then in 2026 we say, well, would have been a good idea if we maybe looked at the Tower Museum and consolidated our museum. So I absolutely get it. I still support all the work that's has been ongoing, but I have to just air my slight frustration. As recently I spoke with some of the stakeholders. One in particular was the Royal Naval Association, and these guys have been around a long time, and they almost gave up on it at a point. And so, but when we've seen the financial commitment and the good news confirmed today about proceeding ahead of or with the future inclusive fund as opposed to that of the city deal, because we can get a head start and not have to wait for all other projects business case to be signed off in order to progress. So there is a lot of positivity there in the background. I do get it. But again, let's keep the pressure on, keep doing the good work. I'd love to bring some friends and family from abroad and the DNA to show them everything from the Battle of the Boyne right through to this day and age and everything that this city has endured. Thanks, Aidan and Chair.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Councillor Fleming, go ahead, Paul.
Thanking you, Chair, and a big thank you as well to Aidan and to the teams that are working on this project, because it is a massive project, and as our Chief Executive alluded to earlier on, it's one part of a jigsaw which would see a major transformation to this city and district. And in terms of trying to move it on, our reps both at council and the MLA level have been in direct engagement with the departments, which actually did see successful. I'm sure all our reps are the same, ring fencing of the money for the project. We also have worked with the Department of Finance to hopefully guarantee the Inclusive Future Funding would be released early for the project than previously anticipated, which would also in terms of all the match funding in place simultaneously. And obviously we have a number of partners who have put money towards the project, and we will continue to lobby executive departments for additional support if and when required. We do support the recommendation. I know it's not set out as a recommendation, but we do support, and obviously it's been proposed and seconded in terms of the de-risk the project. And obviously better doing that now than coming across it in the middle of construction. And I do think as well, as much as the museum will be a game changer for the heritage offer, both in terms of within the city and district, but also much wider field, and the facility will also be an updated in terms of technology, innovation, and accessibility. And it'll also, I think, it will be an opportunity as well in terms of what becomes of the Tower Museum and how we can bring that in and further use, and hopefully in an imaginative and progressive manner, like all of these projects. I mean, there is a lot of positivity, and notwithstanding the challenges that we face, but even in today's meeting and in today's reports, very detailed reports, there's a lot of positivity there that we can hopefully look forward to, and not to. Thanking you, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much, Paul. Councillor McClintock, Hilary, go ahead.
Thanks, Martin. Yes, just want to welcome the report that Aidan brought before us today. I'm all for positivity, and I think that we're actually beginning to think now that this is going to happen. And obviously it's taken a long time, and there was obviously the changes regarding the migration of the Tower Museum has added to the time frame a little bit, but nonetheless we are where we are, and I think it's to be absolutely welcomed that this project can move ahead of other parts of the city deal, which shows that we'll let people see out there in the general public that, you know, that there is actually some actions at the end of all this talking. And I suppose when we had Minister Lyons down a few months ago, he was excited by the whole offer and is very much on board and supportive of the project. And we will continue to lobby for that support when it lands on his desk in the near future. I think that it is the strengthening of the whole DNA offering by bringing in the Tower Museum element to it is to be welcomed. And I also look forward to seeing where we are going with the use of the Tower Museum and how that can add to our city centre offering as well. I mean, there's been a lot of juggling at different elements of funding here to get us here, and I think that you are to be congratulated, Aidan, and the rest of the team, because that hasn't been an easy thing, that we could easily have lost money at one stage. So I think I can't wait to see this project really getting on the ground, and I think it's a positive, good news story that it is going in the right direction. So thank you, Aidan.
Yeah, thanks very much, Alderman McClintock. Aidan, back to yourself in response to some of those points, I'm sure, and then we'll try and move to see if there's any other indicated speakers, but happy to hear from yourself again.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to come back in a couple of points, just in relation to Councillor Farrell's comments, just a little bit of clarity, just I suppose, and apologies if it wasn't clear in my presentation of the report. The business case was updated by Grant Thornton just in the last few weeks, and we'd held that piece of work in abeyance because we knew that we would want to incorporate the latest figures from CPD that we were working with Tourism Northern Ireland, and as many queries as we could that they'd asked us to address in the business case. So it wasn't submitted in November. It was just, there was a refresh and an update done to ensure that Tourism NI had hoped to bring it into their board in December. It now looks like that will be January. And it's also just a wee bit of clarity that this report here is brought into this committee, obviously, because of the specific items that we need to fund in advance of the overall project. But it's very much in parallel with the reports that have been brought into Business and Culture. And some of the items, some of the items that we're looking to move ahead, it really is to ensure that there's nothing wanting, I suppose, on our side in terms of timing, that we're able, that we're moving ahead at a pace and that we're able to meet the start deadline when we get this approval. But I think it's probably key, and it reflects the comments of all of the members, I think, and it's probably worth reiterating. I suppose it was raised at Business and Culture that it is going to be key that all of the departments work, and they're listed there clearly in the funding table, that they all work to bring this through their departments and through their appraisers. We have done absolutely everything we can to meet their deadlines and to respond to them as quickly and as completely as we can. But it's going to be absolutely crucial that they work with us now over the coming weeks to keep this project on track and to allow it, particularly to realise the funding, particularly from National Lottery Heritage Fund, who have been exceptionally accommodating to us and are very keen that this project proceeds. So that is going to be key, and I suppose that, as I say, it was reflected in business and culture. That is something that that we will need, I'm sure, member support on.
Aidan, thanks very much for that. I see Councillor Farr also appreciating the clarification in the chat box as well. Others have been parochial in this meeting already. I'm no different in terms of the water side. This type of the project will be hugely important, not just to the Pacific part of the city where it'll be brought to, but the wider impact and the wider attraction that it will give, not just within the city, but far wider and beyond our council area. So that type of investment is crucial. And as you have said, Aidan, the likes of the Heritage Lottery Fund have been very flexible and very appreciative of the importance of this project. I think that that's worth recording. I also think if you look at what's happening in the Everton site, you have the other private sector investments which will complement the public investments that are happening here, and that type of partnership I think is going to deliver real positive benefits for the water side and wider council area. Members, it's been proposed and seconded. Happy to take that as approved and move on to the next item if members are agreeable, which is item number 11, and that's the Strabane Public Realm Scheme.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll take this report. Members, the purpose of the report is to provide you with a short update on progress with the Strabane Public Realm project since the last report to committee in July. Members will be aware of the background of this particular project and that the Stage E design is complete and full planning permission was granted in July 2019. Funding approval was received from Council to fund a 5% contribution towards the capital costs associated with the project, and this was estimated at 204,000. The scheme is now practically ready to go to tender for the procurement of a main contractor once the remaining funding is secured. Department for Communities have identified Strabane Public Realm as a high priority project, and it is anticipated that they hope to allocate funding to the project in the coming months. The updated economic appraisal, members, had been submitted to DFC for approval, and a cost report received from CPD cost consultations. Members, you're not surprised that this report advises an additional percentage cost allowance is made for current market conditions and inflation in order to reflect the current construction market volatility. And this will result in an increase to the overall capital cost estimate. Members, any increase in estimated overall capital costs will result in an increase in the 5% funding contribution from Council, which was previously estimated at 204,000. Members, these costs are under review. I had hoped today to have an update for you on the final costs, members, but they aren't actually available today. I am hopeful that I will have these available for full Council, and members will be able to give you the specific details at full Council, and I will endeavour to do so if they are available in that time scale. Members, again, as I said, an increase in the estimated construction costs would result in an increase to the Council's 5% funding contribution. And for example, should the overall estimated cost rise by 1 million, this would require an additional Council contribution of 50,000. And again, we hope to have the final figure on that in the next couple of days or so. Any increased requirement could be accommodated from Council's capital budget according to our lead finance officer. And again, members, just to remind you in terms of the previous report, once operational, the project will have ongoing revenue implications for Council. So members, in terms of the recommendations today, if you just note that we may have an increase in the 5% funding contribution, and again, I hope to be able to update members on the specifics of what we estimate that to be at full Council. I'm happy to take any questions that members have, Chair. Thanks.
Yes, Karen, thanks for that. Yeah, there's a couple of questions coming in. Alderman Devaney, then Councillor Mooney, and then Councillor McHugh. Go ahead, Mars.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me in, and I have no problem in proposing the recommendation here. The Strabane Public Realm Scheme will really enhance the experience for people to visit the town of Strabane, and a much needed enhancement. And I do understand, Karen, the problem now when we go out to costings with the increase of cost of material and construction. And look, you've given us a fair indicative cost here. If it was up to $1 million, would be 50,000 extra, and I take that on board. And look, for a project of this size, you're saying here's 4.8 million. I think we have to move with that there in light of the cost of it. The only thing I'm questioning, Karen, is the 100,000 per annum for is it maintenance and around there when it's completely finished. Is that work done in-house, or is that work tendered out to private contractor? But happy to propose, Chair.
Chair, would you like me to take that?
Yeah, go ahead. That's fine,
Yeah,
Karen. Go ahead on that one.
Members, we do our maintenance would be in-house, and members, I think that what you will note in terms of the difference between Strabane public realm and the public realm that we do have in Derry is that we have always maintained the full public realm within Derry ever since previous regeneration projects many years ago. In Strabane, up until the amalgamation of the two councils, that wouldn't have been something that was carried out by council, and really what we wanted to be able to do is to estimate what that would cost, the true cost of that moving forward once the actual project's completed on site. Really, the vast majority of that cost, my understanding from our team, is in terms of keeping it clean and power washing it, which again, members, as you can understand, can be a considerable cost if you do it on a number of occasions per year. So members, that's really just a little bit of background in terms of the maintenance of the public realm.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Mooney, Sean.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Karen for the report. And like Alderman Devaney, I'm happy to second this proposal. This project's been on the go for quite a long time, and it is at a significantly advanced stage now. I had the pleasure of being down there last month to see the Derg and the Strabane area, and part of the tour was this actual area as well, and I can see how much significance it is to the members of Strabane. But saying that, it's for the reasons given, I'm happy to second this year, and thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Sean, for that. Councillor McHugh, Rory.
My good, Chair. Just echoing the previous two councillors, welcoming the report. Seems a long time ago now since myself and Councillor Michaela Boyle attended the consultation with DFI at the outset of this in the Legacy Strabane Council. So it's good to hear in the report that the project is ready to go, and all the while I take on board the point about the potential raise and the financial commitment from council. But it's heartening to hear that if that is the case, that council have made preparations for that and are able to meet that demand. And I also welcome the commitment from the Communities Minister, who has made this a priority, and I welcome the fact that she came down to Strabane recently to take a tour of the town and view, the area in question that undoubtedly will be transformed when this project comes to fruition. So thanks again for the report, Karen, and obviously welcome it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor McHugh. Karen, is there anything else you want to add? I know it's been proposed and seconded, so if you're happy with that, that's grand. Thank you. Okay, that's approved unanimously. On to item 12, which is the City of Derry Airport business case, which I know we've touched on already. But back to Alfie just on this one. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I know we've touched on this previously. So this is to update you on the ongoing engagement with government in relation to the outline business case that was approved by this committee back in March and was subsequently submitted to government in April. Members, we've set out a fair bit of detail in the report, basically just reminding you of the key issues that were considered as part of the business case, the economic impact, the whole range of options that were modelled, the significant economic benefit the airport provides, etc. And they all culminated in basically a three-stranded ask to government, which was basically the whole premise of the whole conclusion in the business case. So that three-stranded ask, members, just for your recollection, was number one, a funding commitment from government of £2.5 million per annum over a 6-year period towards the operating costs of the airport, and that would reduce council's contribution to 1.5 million per annum as compared to its current 3.5 million per annum, and obviously releasing funds for investment in our other critical priorities and pressures that we've discussed previously today. The second key ask was that the London PSO service, which is currently contracted and 100% funded until March 23, is that continue to be 100% supported in principle by Department for Transport and Department for Economy for the same 6-year duration. And finally, members, that North-South Ministerial Council discussions focusing on the Dublin PSO service would be prioritised at the earliest opportunity in support of the airport and the Northwest economic recovery and development, and obviously that route would deliver significant further GVA benefits to the region. So members, following that approval, the business case was submitted in April. There's been a range of correspondence since with relevant ministers as well as meetings with departments. All the formal correspondence with ministers and governments has been attached in Appendix 1 for your reference. It is fair to say, members, that progress has been slow and no commitment of funding has as yet been secured. There are a few critical issues that have been identified by government that need to be resolved, and you will note, members, when I run through them, that they're obviously beyond the control of council, and effectively these issues need to be resolved at government level. So just quickly running through the three key issues that we've been advised of. Number one is the departmental varies. So whilst responsibilities for PSO is fairly clear, responsibility for funding of airport operational costs at executive level remains unclear and unresolved by government. This, along with the fact that the airport will not reach a break-even position, which is inevitable given it's a small regional airport, means that any funding will require a wider executive decision. So that's our first key issue. The second one is obviously we have a significant proportion of ROA passengers, which poses challenges for government departments here when they're assessing the benefits of the business case. So whilst the ROA government is continuing to progress a review into the viability of a Dublin Derry PSO route, it's been made very clear that funding discussions with the ROA will need to be championed and led by executive ministers through the North-South Ministerial Council. Again, an issue, members, that government need to be resolved. And finally, members, obviously government have relayed back that the pandemic obviously continues to impact the aviation industry and the achievement of our preferred option within the business case. Against that, members, I would highlight that there has been significant recent success in terms of securing new routes, and also the airport is noticing that changing travel patterns and working from home trends are presenting greater opportunities for CODA, and benefits have already been seen in that regard. So members, it's really critical at this point that progress is made as a matter of urgency. This is a key component of our financing strategy for our strategic projects. You'll note the most recent correspondence is that a further meeting has now been secured with the Minister for Finance and the Minister for Infrastructure in an attempt to progress these outstanding issues and identify a timeline for solutions. I've highlighted the financial implications in that we're aiming to rebalance the funding responsibility between government and council, freeing up 2 million of our current contribution. Failure to secure that, members, would obviously present very significant challenges for council. So it's recommended that you endorse the ongoing work engagement in relation to the business case and associated asks, and continue to promote with the relevant ministers the importance of ensuring a funding resolution is urgently secured. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Alfie, for that. A couple of indicated speakers then, Councillor Boyle and then Councillor Duffy. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'll keep it brief. Happy to endorse the ongoing work. And I'm pleased to see now that that meeting has been secured with Minister Murphy and Minister Mallon. I did indicate earlier somewhat disappointed to discover that Minister Lyons doesn't feel that there's any degree of interest or responsibility from his department. I feel that, well, what can you say? That seems to be their position. It's a disappointing position. And I really think that it would have been advantageous to have had all three ministers involved in that meeting, given that Minister Lyons would have some degree of oversight of the PSO responsibilities. And again, I would encourage those who may well have a voice to perhaps direct or ask on our behalf if Minister Lyons might reconsider that particular request. However, we are where we are, and it's encouraging to see. But Alfie, I do have one question, and that is, albeit that a meeting has been secured, have you any date or fixed date for that meeting? Because as indicated earlier in the very first paper that you presented, time is ticking and time is of the essence. Not to be too terribly dramatic about it, but this has been slow in terms of progressing. The virus has obviously been one of the complications around it. I think we're starting to get to a point. I'm certainly optimistic that we're getting to a point where there might be some light at the end of this particularly lengthy tunnel. But I would be most interested to learn how quickly the two departments can put that meeting on their into their diaries, because I know that in the event that they can do so, that we will move mountains to make sure that it's in the diaries of those responsible from the council and City of Derry Airport end.
Okay, thanks for that. I'll bring in Councillor Duffy and then Alderman McCready before I bring you back in, Alfie. Go ahead, Sandra.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and Alfie, thank you for the report. And I have to say, I really get your frustration in terms of this issue. We know the importance of the airport in terms of the connectivity of the Northwest City region. We know its importance. I mean, you've laid it out very clearly to us this evening in terms of its importance in unlocking potential and funding for the city and district. So it's a key element in everything that we want to do and how we want to achieve it. I agree in terms of the high percentage of passengers that are coming from Donegal, and I know that my party colleague Padraig McLaughlin, he has raised the issue in the Dáil time and time again, to ensure that it is on the table there as well. I think that there is frustration in terms of the speed of movement around that review as well. It's frustrating me. I have to say, like Councillor Boyle, I'm hugely disappointed in Minister Lyons and where he's at with this. We know the importance of this. We know we have to make a political decision and a political call around it. It needs to get onto the table of the Northwest Ministerial Council. It needs to be at that level that we start making these decisions around it. I feel the frustration. I know the importance of it, and I would ask our other colleagues here on the call to use the influence that they have around it. I do welcome the fact that Conor Murphy and Nicola Mallon are agreeing to meet and to take it forward, but we need that wider consensus as well. So, look, happy to endorse the report as well, Alfie, but I really do. I mean, we know the importance of the airport to the city and district. We know the importance of this business case in terms of unlocking further potential. that's where we need to be, and that's the position that we need to be in. So happy to endorse the approach, and just on the back of that, to congratulate the board, the CODA board, because I think that the work that you have done has been tremendous. You have stuck with this, and to congratulate you in terms of the number of announcements in recent weeks around flights and further destinations, because it just goes further to demonstrate the key strategic relevance of this airport to us as a Northwest region in terms of the economy and tourism and everything. So it's good to see that progress. So congratulations to the board for sticking with it. The business case is there. We will do everything we can as a party to try and progress it. So thank you, Alfie, for the report.
Thank you, Sandra. Alderman McCready.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Alfie and team, for the report. Whilst I acknowledge the progress and decisions that were made in Council, and indeed those that were made on the board of CODA, I'm happy with all the work that's been done. What I'm not happy with is the correspondence, which I've read every one of them, and I've been trying to lobby in the background and find out exactly what does this place mean to people in the executive office and those in the assembly. I'll tell you what, we don't feature too heavily. The fact that in some of the correspondence in Quebec from ministers didn't think they had the business case, and then a week later they acknowledge they do have the business case, and all ministers in the three are almost passing it pillar to post. They haven't been decisive. They haven't put it forward on to the executive table. They say, look, there's a time-sensitive issue in the Northwest with this airport, and how the good and benefits of the GVA and all the other pros that we've outlined. The case is there for that airport, and for no decision to be taken at this point is obfuscation of their duties. I really infuriates me that we in Council can do everything we can do, but once it's outside of our remit in the Assembly, that no action's taken. Lots of platitudes, signing off letters that we support the connectivity in the Northwest. Well, clearly not, if this isn't being reviewed in great detail and make a decision on it. They need to make a decision to approve this business case. I encourage them to do so. I encourage everybody who has MLAs or executive ministers up there to get on with it, because I'm at a point where I'm no longer going to accept it. And we as a council have made that clear over the last number of months. It's gone on long enough, Chair. And now, thanks for allowing me to speak on it, and thanks for the work that is ongoing with the board and our council officers on this. But we can't have this conversation again in March of next year, which leads me to my question for Alfie. At what point in time, if this is not signed, do we have serious ramifications and implications that this council, which own and are indemnified to a lot of the financial ongoings in CODA, when do we have an increased risk that we need to deal with, notwithstanding the implications that the board will have to deal with? Thanks, Chair.
Okay. A number of people have spoken, so I'm going to bring Alfie back in, but I see that there's... Sorry, folks, will just come back through the chat box here to make sure I haven't missed anybody. Yeah, Alfie, do you want to come in? And then I think the Chief Executive might want to come in as well. Go ahead, Alfie.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members, the last two pieces in relation to the meeting date, the last two pieces of correspondence have basically indicated an agreement to meet. We're just currently liaising diaries at the minute to try and agree that date as soon as possible. So hopefully that meeting will be in the very short-term future. Secondly, in relation to Alderman McCready's question, at what point in time is there a significant financial risk? Obviously, members, as we go into the next financial year, the longer we go into that year, it becomes a very significant financial risk. At the start of this process, our aim was to have this resolved by 31st of March 22, and that continues to remain our aim and our focus. If we don't achieve that, we're into drawing on underwrites and reserves next year to ensure that we can continue operation until the business case issue is resolved. So, and from my perspective, 31st of March 22 needs to be a clear date that we need to achieve. We've had the business case in the system from April, and hopefully with the right impetus we can resolve it within that time frame.
Yeah, thank you. Chief Executive, is there anything that you wish to add?
Yeah, Chair. Just to add to Alfie's comments with regard to this, we have taken steps to ensure that the continued operation of the airport is not at risk while this funding is being considered. However, as you've heard today, members, if we don't get a decision on this within the next few months, the delivery of our entire suite of capital projects is severely at risk because we won't be able to develop that funding strategy. And we have heard today from a number of members in relation to there are component parts to that funding strategy. And if we don't achieve each part of it, every other part of it is potentially at risk. And we will be into a very difficult process of trying to then figure out what we can take forward and what we can't take forward, which would be a hugely massive missed opportunity given all the work that has taken place. So in terms of the operation of the airport, its immediate future is secure. However, beyond next year, and I mean the next financial year, as Alfie said, we are then heavily challenged by the onward financing of that. But it's not just the financing of the airport. As I said, it's the financing of our wider strategic objectives. So members, we are attempting to get that further meeting and the date in the diary. We are encouraged by the support that we have received from all of the ministers, but we most definitely are concerned that at this stage, 8 months since submission of the business case, that we have received no positive outcome. And we've reflected today on the complexities of working through business cases with government departments. We do not have any written questions in respect of that business case yet either, 8 months down the line. So that is a matter of grave concern to us as senior officers in terms of the timing and the time that is left to make this decision. But hopefully, members, as you've outlined today, the support that is available and the will that we are receiving from the respective ministers will lead to a positive outcome in the not too distant future.
Thanks very much for that, John. I see Alderman Quiddy, you're come back in again, so go ahead, please.
Thanks very much for that, Chair, and the clarity. The two questions for follow-up, I think one has been in part answered, but for clarification, what information has the ministers or the departments asked for from either council or CODA in order to for them to make a decision on this? Because since April to now, I haven't seen any, so I don't know who is waiting on what in order to make a decision. And secondly, has the executive made you as the council or the board aware that have they shared the ask within the business case via the North-South Ministerial Council to the Republic of Ireland? And because that's the only way it can be done, the Taoiseach or the Dáil or the Republic of Ireland's government can't take a direct request from a local authority, us or indeed CODA as a business. So an update on those two questions if you do have the answers. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, John, do you want to come back in there? Yeah.
In respect to both questions, and Alfie can correct me if I'm wrong in this, there was a meeting between council officials, CODA officials and departmental officials at the end of August when the business case was discussed and the challenges and issues around the business case was discussed. We, to the best of my knowledge, have not received any questions in writing with regard to the business case. And indeed, my letter to the respective ministers on the 9th of November sets out very clearly that if there is any expectation of further work required by council, we need to understand what that is, because we're not sitting at this moment in time with questions to answer or further work to undertake. And that's my concern, is that at some point we may get that, which will then lead to a further process. Alfie, Alfie, could you correct me if I'm wrong in that? Are there any written questions that we have not yet answered?
No, John, there are no written questions. At the meeting we held with departmental officials, we were advised verbally of a few issues. I've highlighted those issues in the report today because they're all, from my perspective, issues that need to be resolved by government and not by council, i.e. departmental vires isn't something that we can control. So we have no outstanding written correspondence that we need to respond to, and we've been asking for that, but there's clearly bigger issues to be resolved urgently before we can even get into the more detailed questions in the business case, would be my assessment at this point.
Thanks, Alfie. Thanks for allowing me to bring Alfie on there, Chair. And with regard to the second issue, I'm not aware if the issue has been formally raised through NSMC. I'm obviously aware of challenges to the NSMC meeting over the last period. I am aware of informal conversations that have taken place between ministers from the executive and ministers from the Irish government, and certainly we have corresponded directly with Irish government ministers with regard to the issue.
Okay, thanks, John and Alfie, for the additional points of clarification. Members, this has been proposed and seconded, so unless anybody has anything else to add in relation to it, happy to take it as approved. And that brings us to the end of item 12, which we had started off in terms of this afternoon talking about how many of these items are interlinked. So I want to thank all the officers across all the items who have spoken there this afternoon. Obviously, all of those projects are of huge significance, not just to this council, but the wider northwest area, and indeed the future of this part of the island. So it is appropriate that we just pause and thank officers for all of those updates and setting out a clear position of where we are and where we want to get to. Members, moving on to item 13 then is amendment to standing orders, pages 135 to 138 in the pack.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That's me taking that one. Members, this paper is simply to provide an update to standing orders in light of the judgment in the Heartlands decision, which members are aware of. It's clear following that judgment that it would be unlawful for the council to continue to exempt quasi-judicial decisions from call-in. And so there are two amendments to standing orders that are recommended within the report. The first relates to the deletion and substitution of two subparagraphs within the standing orders. Members, in standing order 3.2, standing order 21.12A will be deleted, and that relates to the exclusion of a regulatory or quasi-judicial decision from call-in. And the second one, members, there's a small typo there. That should be standing order 21.12B to be deleted and replaced with a standing order which states that you can't call in a matter where there would be a delay, where it would cause a delay, except where there is a statutory or other duty, or in certain cases of absolute emergency. And so, members, the final point then is to reinstate the original wording of 21.34, which was amended on the last standing orders review. That wording that is before you there, members, is the wording that was contained within the standing orders previously. and we'd taken it out because effectively it really only applied to those quasi-judicial and regulatory decisions. So it's simply to reinstate the wording that existed within the previous set of standing orders. Members, happy to take any questions that members might have on that.
Yeah, thanks, Philip, for talking us through that item. And indicate a speaker in the chat box. Councillor Doyle, go ahead, Emmett.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Philip. When I read through this, I have to say, just on the look of it, I was a bit concerned, because the spirit and indeed the letter of the judgment indicated that we should not be limiting the call-in process, and yet I'm looking at the aspect here where an ad hoc committee, for example, will be set up of all chairpersons and deputy chairpersons to consider the process adopted by the decision-making committee. Now, obviously, in a selfish capacity, that excludes me because I'm not a chair or deputy chair. It also excludes, I believe, people before profit councillors and independent councillors, apart from, I think, Councillor Gallagher, because none of us are chairs or deputy chairs. Now that makes up almost a quarter of the council. Now, in terms of how we actually implement the letter and the spirit of the judgment, I am vexed as to why we need that extra process and why quasi-judicial decisions can't just go through the normal call-in process where X number of members initiate it. Now, maybe I'm sure there's a reason that maybe I'm missing, but it just seems to me that we're not necessarily sticking to the letter and the spirit of the judgment. And I'm wondering, Philip, if you may be able to clarify for me, please.
Thanks, Councillor Doyle. Philip, is there any points of clarification you can bring now for Councillor Doyle?
Yeah, Chair. Firstly, this is the process that is recommended by the department in relation to this type of decision. Secondly, I can advise that this is the process that is being adopted by other councils in relation to this, and indeed has already been adopted by a number of councils in relation to this. And thirdly, it's really because the process relates to decisions which have already been delegated by councils to a particular committee, and this then creates a filter mechanism in relation to those matters before they are necessarily referred back to that committee. That's really the three reasons for it. As I say, Chair, this is, Chair, the process which had been adopted by this council previously, up until the review of standing orders, which I think, if I recollect correctly, was finalised in the last 12 months. The most recent review, this basically reinstates the process that this council had previously adopted and that would have applied prior to that review.
Okay, thanks for that. I see you want back in, Emmett, but I'll go to the next indicated speaker first, Alderman McCready. Go ahead, Ryan.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Philip, for the report and recommendations, which I rely on your professional qualifications and you're a man of good character. And so I'm happy to accept recommendations that has been proposed, or for the amendment of the standing orders, and reassuring that it's in line with the department and we've had a lesson learned in terms of the recent judgment. And from my recollection, there was three aspects or components to it, of which two of which we were fine, but the third one, which was the issue, which is why we're here, I suppose. And so I've got no problem, unless there's any other aspects which we're not informed about. I'm happy to accept them. And lastly, Chair, if I may, just on this, we did discuss this in open forum at one point, prematurely, I think, in hindsight. And the officer was vilified by a member, which was entirely uncalled for. And I just like to place my position on record that I support all the officers and in their capacity and their professionalism to do so. They're not without challenge or scrutiny, but in the manner in which it was done was absolutely uncalled for and unacceptable from my personal point of view. And I just like to put my support on there for the officer, Philip. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Alderman McCready. Councillor Doyle wishes to come back in again. Go ahead, Emmett.
Thank you, Chair. Philip, in terms of, granted that these are the regulations and the standing orders that have come down from the department, but is there anything from your perspective stopping us from simply using the normal call-in process whenever a call-in on a quasi-judicial matter is subject to a call-in? I suppose that probably should have been the question that I asked first. I just have concerns that there were certain members, just because they're either independents or from a small parties, including myself, of course, that weren't able to engage in decisions that were outlined by the planning committee, for example. But now we've got this process to engage in a call, and it feels like the same process is almost applying, that we won't have that opportunity, and I'm very keen to see if there's a way around that. Thank you.
Philip, do you want to come back now, or on that point, or will we go to the next indicated speaker?
Chair, obviously it's a matter for you, but maybe if you want to see if there's any other comments,
Yeah,
come back on it.
That's great. I'll bring in Councillor Mooney and then back to yourself. Sean?
Thank you, Chair. Just on that note, thank you, Philip, for the for the report. I can see it as the outworking of the one part of the Heartlands judgment. One question I have would be in relation to the model itself. Is sort of considering that we have 6 standing committees, and obviously if you're a chair and vice chair of any of the committees, but if you're on the parent committee that is the subject of a call-in, and let's say that you're a chair or vice chair, obviously a GSP, but you sit in planning, and planning is the subject of call-in. Is there any provision for that to say that you might have to step aside or something like that there if there's any conflict built into the procedure? I don't know if I'm explaining it right, Philip, but I think what I'm trying to say is if you're a chair, vice chair, and a member of planning, can your party nominate a substitute if there's a conflict that overlaps in any of the committees? Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I'll bring you in, Philip, now then, to try and take some of those points.
I mean, Chair, firstly, in relation to Councillor Doyle's point, there's nothing. There is no legal impediment to the point that he's making in relation to the matter. It's more practical issues in terms of the fact that obviously, for example, and I mean it's only as an example, this isn't relating purely and simply to planning decisions, it's other regulatory decisions and so on as well, and other decisions that might come from committees, but the filter mechanism is there. Simply to determine whether or not there is a merit in the call-in or not. The call-in issue then has to be referred back to the committee for the committee to determine as the committee that has the expertise. So, for example, these are primarily designed to deal with issues where it is felt that a committee perhaps didn't have all of the information before it that it should have had. And it's determined whether or not there is merit in that argument, and if there is merit in that argument, then the issue is referred back to the committee so that the committee can make the correct decision with all of the information in front of it. It's not an appeal mechanism, members. The appeals mechanism from the PAC exists, or for example to the Planning Appeals Commission, or indeed members in terms of licensing to the county court. Those appeal mechanisms exist elsewhere, and they still exist. This is designed to deal with an issue where it is felt that perhaps a decision hasn't been made, and that's the language that is used. It's for reconsideration. It's not appeal. Reconsideration is the language which is used within the 2014 Act. In case Councillor Mooney's point, no, is the simple answer to that. The provision that exists here is intended that the members of the committee that has having its decision called in would be able to attend the meeting at which the decision, the call-in was being decided, but that those members of that committee would not have a right to determine in relation to the call-in, because if the call-in is determined in favourably, then the matter will be referred back to that committee and they will have the information available and will be in a position then to reconsider and participate fully in the decision making at that process.
Okay, thanks for that, Philip. Clarification. I see there's a comment in the chat box now from Councillor Doyle. This has been proposed by Alderman McCready and seconded by Councillor Duffy. I also, in response to Councillor Doyle's point that's on in the chat box about wanting to project this as he believes it shuts out some members out of the process. We have a process in our council through the hunt. People are elected to this chamber by the mandate given to them by the people. And your party colleague at the time, Councillor McCluskey, she took a position, a deputy chair of business and culture in year one. So the position available to our two was there, and she chose that position, deputy chair of business and culture. At the AGM every year, all parties get, on the basis of the hunt, the opportunity to appoint themselves onto various different committees and make their choices according to the mandate that they've been given. So people fill the positions on the planning committee based on the strength of their mandate. So that includes some of the smaller parties in our chamber. We've had people before profit, 2 councillors who have been in the position of deputy chair of the planning committee. Indeed, the current chair of the planning committee is a member of a party that has 2 councillors in this chamber. So for Councillor Doyle to be suggesting that smaller parties don't have a say or don't have a mechanism of being involved in the planning committee simply does not hold water. But nonetheless, Councillor Doyle, you've made a proposal and indicating in the chat box that you want to propose it. So happy to allow your proposal to go onto the floor if it has a seconder. So happy to take the next indicated speaker, which is Councillor Donnelly. Go ahead.
Chair, can I have a point of order raised, please?
Okay, point of order, Councillor Alderman McCready, go ahead.
Thanks. The point of order is there is a proposal already on. Do we have to deal with that in turn and then deal with any subsequent ones, Chair?
Yeah, happy to take a direction from Philip on that. I do recall you proposed the item as it was when you were speaking initially. Philip, is there clarification you can bring on that point?
Chair, there should only be one proposal on the floor at the time, obviously. I believe you're correct, Chair. Alderman McCready did make the proposal, and I believe in the chat box, Councillor Duffy has seconded that proposal. Obviously, if that proposal was to fall, then Councillor Doyle has a proposal on the floor which would follow on from that. But if Alderman McCready's proposal is passed, then that would close the matter down.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Philip. Councillor Donnelly, you indicated you wish to speak. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, Chair, look, what I initially indicated, so could second Councillor Doyle's proposal. And Chair, look, I have to say that, we've been through all this before about the hunt, and I do believe the hunt has its flaws. I'm an independent councillor. I represent, none of the other independent councillors represent myself or vice versa. I believe that I represent the people that voted for me to the best of my ability. But Chair, the hunt is flawed, and it does exclude, whether you want to admit it, and I think some councillors here are very selective at times. Sometimes they'll open up committees, the all independents, or and then at other times then they'll go back to the same rhetoric about the sizes of mandates. Chair, I do not have the same mandate as the parties. They have a bigger mandate, but however, I do have an opinion on a lot of things, and I do believe that the hunt system does exclude in certain circumstances. So I was going to propose Councillor Doyle's proposal, seconded, sorry. So we'll wait to see what happens or how this continues. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Donnelly. The hunt is what we have in legislation for the process of filling the positions of responsibility and the positions on committees. So that's the mechanism we have to work with. Proposal on the floor proposed by Alderman McCready to accept the recommendation and then seconded by Councillor Duffy. If anyone is opposed to that, can you indicate now? And if so, we go to a vote. I know that Councillor Doyle, you'd indicated that you wish to reject it. If that's still your position, then please make it clear now, and then we move to a vote if needed. Okay, thanks, Councillor Doyle, for that in the chat box. Chief Executive or Senior Council Officer, can we take a vote on this, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Alderman Breslin.
Against.
Say again, against.
Against.
Alderman Devaney.
Is this for the recommendation?
This is for the proposal that is on the floor, as I understand it.
Yep, for.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it might be worth clarifying, Chief Executive. This is for the proposal made by Alderman McCready and seconded by Councillor Duffy to accept the recommendation.
Could I change mine again?
Yes, you can. The vote's still open.
I go for four.
Thank you. Alderman Devaney.
Sorry.
For, John.
Alderman McClintock.
For.
Alderman McCready.
For.
Councillor John Boyle.
For.
Councillor Donnelly.
Against.
Councillor Doyle.
Against, John.
Councillor Duffy.
For.
Councillor Farrell.
For.
Councillor Fleming.
For, John.
Councillor Heaney.
For.
Councillor McHugh. Councillor McHugh. Councillor Mooney. Councillor Mooney.
For, John.
Councillor Riley.
For, John.
Thank you, members.
John, my apologies, Councillor McHugh, for.
Thank you. Chair, I've recorded 12 for and 2 against, so the proposal passes.
Okay, thank you for that, Chief Executive. Members, that concludes item 13, which is the last of the items that are open for decision. So we'll move now to the open for information items 14 to 17, which we'll take as read unless any member wants to speak to any of the items. If so, please indicate now. And if not, can I have a proposal for to move to confidential, please?
Alderman Devaney proposes we move on to confidential.
Seconded, John Boyd.
Okay, thank you very much. Just bear with us till we confirm that the webcast has been turned off.